When I first stepped into our new house, everything felt like an adventure. I was excited to find hidden treasures in the attic or explore the overgrown backyard. But soon, my excitement turned to unease when my husband and I discovered something strange: a locked door. No one had mentioned it when we bought the place, and it felt out of place, just standing there like a shadow among the sunlight. Every night, I would lie awake, listening to soft knocks and whispers coming from behind that door. My heart raced and I felt a chill crawl up my spine. What was behind it? I couldn't help but wonder if it was a secret we weren't meant to uncover. The door called to me like a ghostly whisper, and I knew we had to find out what lay beyond. Join me on this spine-tingling journey where every creak of the floorboards and every faint sound feels like a secret waiting to be uncovered. Comment below and let me know where you're listening from. I promise you it'll be a ride filled with mystery, fear, and the unknown. Will we discover what lurks behind that locked door? Or will it lead us to a terrifying truth? Let's begin this unsettling tale together. I felt the cold rush of air brush against my skin just as the door slammed shut behind me, cutting me off from the warmth of the house. My heart raced, pounding so loud I thought the dark room around me might hear it. I looked around, and the shadows danced in the corners, swirling like a fog that refused to settle. The smell of dust and something else, something rotten, filled my nose, making my stomach twist. I took a step forward, my foot echoing against the wooden boards. Each step felt like an invitation to whatever watched me from the shadows. The dim light spilled in from the hallway, but barely reached the back of the room. I could barely make out old furniture covered in white sheets, like ghosts waiting for someone to remember them. As I moved deeper inside, I glanced at the old toys scattered on the floor. Their paint chipped and eyes dull, they seemed to stare at me, judging me for disturbing their slumber. Suddenly, a flicker caught my eye. One of the dolls, a porcelain figure with cracked skin and a haunting smile, sat in a chair, seemingly turned towards me. I rubbed my eyes, telling myself it was just a trick of the light. But when I looked again, it was still there, and I could swear that its smile widened just a bit. My breath quickened as I stepped back, feeling an overwhelming urge to flee. That's when I heard it, a soft, low giggle that echoed from the shadows. It was a sound filled with mischief and malice. I froze. My mind raced back to the first night we heard the whispers. I remembered the voice calling my name, and panic surged through me. I shook my head, trying to clear the fear fogging my thoughts. Get a grip, I whispered to myself, hoping to muster some courage. I turned my flashlight towards a corner of the room, where the darkness seemed thicker. As the beam hit the wall, I saw markings carved into the paint, strange symbols and words I couldn't understand. They twisted and turned, almost like they were alive, like something was trying to escape from their confines. My skin prickled as I traced my fingers along the closest symbol, feeling a tingle that made me gasp. It was as if the almost electric energy pulsed beneath my touch. Suddenly, the doll's giggle turned into a loud cackle that filled the room, bouncing off the walls and attacking my senses. I spun around, scanning the shadows, my heart pounding like a drum in my chest. "Who's there?" I called out, my voice barely more than a whisper. Silence fell, thick and oppressive. I swore I could hear the sound of my heartbeat in the overwhelming quiet. Then, as if in reply, the whispers started again. They were soft at first, just a hiss, but they quickly grew louder, a chorus of overlapping voices, each one a blend of urgency and terror. They seemed to echo from all around me, begging, urging me to leave, to run before it was too late. Panicking, I stumbled back toward the door, but it was no longer where I thought it should be. The familiar passage seemed to have twisted and stretched, pushing the door further away, as if the house itself was playing a cruel trick on me. I turned to look toward the window, where the pale light from the moon struggled to break through the filthy glass. I hadn't seen how dark it had become until now. Just then, movement caught my eye again. This time, it was not just a shadow, but a figure starting to emerge from behind the old sheets. My breath caught in my throat. Was it real? It crept slowly, deliberately, its movements jerky, as if it was not used to being awake. The shape was human-like, but covered in darkness, a figure cloaked in night. "Help me," it pleaded, its voice a raspy whisper that slid around the edges of my mind like a cold wind. Confusion rushed over me. Is this a joke? I stammered, horror fluttering in my chest. But deep down, I knew this was not a game. I took a hesitant step back, seeking the sanctuary of the familiar. The figure jolted forward, revealing a pale face, gaunt and hollow with sunken eyes that glowed faintly like the embers of a fire. "You have to let me out," it cried, clawing the air with skeletal fingers. The eerie light of the figure cast long shadows that flickered with every frantic movement it made, and I staggered backward, tripping over a forgotten toy lying on the ground. With a surge of panic, I scrambled to my feet and ran toward the door. It remained stubbornly closed, and I pounded on it, shouting, "Let me out! Please! I need to get out of here!" But the whispers grew louder, drowning out my cries. They swirled around me like a storm, and the figure's face twisted in anguish, its mouth moving but no sound breaking through. I had to escape this nightmare. Fighting against the overwhelming dread, I focused on the twisted symbols on the walls. Maybe they held the key to understanding what was happening, or perhaps they would help me find a way out. I scanned the marks again. There were patterns, almost like a map, leading me to a corner in the darkness that I hadn't noticed yet. Summoning my courage, I dashed towards it, feeling the cold breath of the figure trailing close behind me. The atmosphere in the room grew thicker, as if the walls themselves wanted to close in. But I pushed forward, hoping there was something that could help me. The symbols glowed faintly as I approached, pulsating with an energy that stirred something deep within me. With a deep breath, I discreetly traced one of the symbols with my hand, forcing myself to remember the ancient stories I'd read. Perhaps this was more than just a random collection of marks. Perhaps they were a warning. My skin prickled, and suddenly, the whispers grew chaotic, merging into a chilling chant. My heart thundered as a flood of doubts rushed through me. What if I was wrong? What if touching these symbols would only make things worse? But it was too late, and as I pressed my fingers into the carving, a blinding light erupted around me. The room spun, darkness and light colliding in a fevered dance, and I felt a tugging sensation as if the very fabric of the air was twisting and turning. I clung to the wall, desperate to remain grounded as my vision blurred, the figure behind me shrinking into the shadows, its relentless cries echoing beyond the chaos. Then everything went quiet, and in a heartbeat, I let go of the symbol. As I staggered back, I found myself standing in a completely different room, one filled with the scent of freshly baked bread and the soft light of a fire crackling in the hearth. Where was I now? This felt like a home, warm and inviting, unlike the haunted space I had just fled. My heart raced as I realized that I was no longer in the locked room, but the echoes of that terrifying encounter lingered in my mind, and I couldn't shake the feeling that whatever had been behind that door was now lurking somewhere close by, waiting for me to discover its dark secrets. I had escaped one nightmare, but had I opened the door to another? I took a cautious step forward, scanning my surroundings, searching for any signs of the figure or the whispers. Instead, I found a wall lined with pictures of families smiling, their happy faces caught in time. But among them, I noticed one figure standing away from the others, eyes filled with sadness. Could this be a clue to the chilling mystery of the locked door? As I approached the photo, my breath caught at the sight of a name written in the corner, my own. My heart pounded as I stared at the picture, my own name glaring back at me in an old-fashioned script. Confusion washed over me. How could this be? I had never lived here before. I felt the familiar coldness creep back into my veins, and the warmth of the other room faded like a distant dream. The family in the photo looked so happy, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something terrible had happened here. Suddenly, a sound shattered the silence. A soft creaking echoed from behind me, growing louder and more unnerving with every second. I spun around, adrenaline coursing through me, but there was nothing, just the faint crackle of the fire and the sound of my own breathing. I took a cautious step toward the door I had entered through, but it was gone. In its place was a wall, solid and unyielding. I pressed my palms against the cool surface, panic rising in my chest. How could I have lost the way out? I looked back at the unsettling photo again, feeling as if it was watching me, judging my every move. The joy in the picture felt like a taunt, a mockery of my fear. I needed to figure out how I got here and how to escape before whatever had been lurking in the shadows found me again. I turned to the fireplace, hoping to find a clue. The logs were still smoking, and the embers glowed dimly in the fading light. I stepped closer, peering into the ashes. Glinting among the debris was a small object, half buried in the soot. I knelt down and reached inside, pulling out a tiny silver key, its surface gleaming like a star against the cold, dark remnants of the fire. A chill ran down my spine as I held the key. What could it unlock? A sliver of hope flickered in my mind. It had to lead me to a way out, or maybe even to the truth about this place. I looked around for something, anything the key might open. The walls were lined with shadowy corners, each one seeming to whisper secrets, urging me to explore. I walked to the far end of the room, where an ornate cabinet stood quietly. Its wood was dark and ancient, but it called to me. I could feel an energy surrounding it, an unspeakable urge to discover what lay within. I approached it cautiously, heart racing, and inserted the key into the lock. Slowly, I turned it, listening to the satisfying click that reverberated in the stillness. With trembling hands, I pushed the heavy door open. Inside, the cabinet was filled with dusty old books, their spines cracked and weary. The musty smell overwhelmed me, but among the books, I noticed something else. At the back of the cabinet, behind a stack of faded tomes, lay an old journal. My fingers brushed against the leather cover, and I felt a jolt of electricity surge through me. I pulled the journal out, opening it to the first page. The handwriting was elegant yet shaky, telling tales of a family who once lived here. They were stories filled with laughter and adventure, but the tone changed as I read further. The later entries spoke of shadows creeping into their lives, strange occurrences happening in the night, and the chilling fear of a locked door that no one dared to touch. As I flipped through the pages, a sudden noise caught my attention, a soft thud, like footsteps behind me. My heart leaped into my throat. I quickly slammed the journal shut and turned around, but there was nothing. Just the flickering firelight casting eerie shapes on the walls. I was not alone. The sensation of being watched crept over me. I felt it deep in my bones. Holding my breath, I tried to gather my thoughts. The journal mentioned a family secret, something they had hidden away, something they feared. I needed to know what it was. I couldn't ignore the feeling that the answer lay behind the locked door that haunted my nights. Desperation pushed me forward. I remembered the cold breath of the figure, how it had called for help. Was it possible it was trapped behind that door for a reason? Was it linked to the family in the journal? With urgency, I searched the cabinet again, hoping to find another clue. That's when I noticed a small drawer hidden under one of the shelves. I yanked it open and found nothing but a crumpled piece of paper. My hands shook as I opened it, revealing a map drawn in hasty lines. The map pointed to various spots in the house, notes scribbled in the margins. One marked place stood out, a basement labeled simply where the screams end. My blood ran cold as I read those words. It felt ominous and heavy, filled with a dread I could not shake off. I had to see this for myself. I couldn't let fear paralyze me. I grabbed the journal and the key, tucking them under my arm before making my way back through the room, determined to find this basement. As I moved, shadows flickered around me, and I could almost hear whispers following my steps. It was a constant reminder that I had unlocked something far more sinister than just a door. I finally located another door at the end of the hall, slightly ajar, and the cool air seemed to seep through the crack, an awful chill that made me shiver. I pushed the door open and descended the narrow staircase. The darkness enveloped me like a shroud. Each creak of the old wood echoing in the silence felt like a warning. I reached for the light switch, but nothing happened. The only illumination came from the faint glow of moonlight spilling through a small, dirt-covered window. The basement felt like a different world altogether. The air was thick and damp, filled with the sense of mildew and decay. A sense of foreboding hung heavy, and I fought the urge to turn back. I stepped further in, heart racing as I struggled to make out my surroundings. The clutter of broken furniture and forgotten things lay scattered around like skeletons of the past. And then I saw it, a door at the far end of the basement, locked and imposing. It felt like it was watching me as if it knew I was coming. I approached cautiously, feeling a pull toward it, an undeniable urge to turn the key I still held. As I reached for the door, the shadows around me began to twist and writhe like they were alive. I could hear that soft giggle again, and it chilled me to the bone. "Don't open it," a voice echoed, a sweet yet sinister whisper that seemed to come from nowhere and everywhere at once. I hesitated, the key hovering above the lock. "Please, don't let it out." The voice, almost pleading, filled with anxiety, was both a warning and a curse. Panic surged again, but I couldn't let it stop me. Gripping the key tightly, I forced myself to turn it in the lock. The door creaked open, revealing a dark void beyond that seemed to suck in light. A profound silence enveloped me as I peered into the darkness, the weight of fear pressing down. And then I heard it, a low growl, like the rumble of distant thunder, vibrating through the air. The shadows surged forward, swirling around my legs, gripping me like cold hands, and I gasped. Was something there, waiting for me in the dark? I felt a whirlwind of emotions, the chill of terror and the heat of curiosity battling within me. I needed to know. Breathless from the tension, I stepped inside, feeling the darkness wrap around me, pulling me further toward the truth. As soon as I crossed the threshold, the door slammed shut behind me. The door slammed shut behind me with a force that made the air shudder. I spun around, but there was nothing I could do. My heart raced as I pressed my palms against the cold wood, looking for a way to escape, but it held firm, unyielding. The darkness enveloped me, devouring what little light had remained. Panic clawed at my throat, and I felt the walls closing in, as if the room itself was alive. I took a deep breath, forcing myself to move forward into the inky void ahead. My pulse thundered in my ears, drowning out all other sounds. As I stepped further into the room, the space seemed to shift, growing larger and darker, leaving me disoriented. I struggled to see anything, but shadows danced around me, twisting and turning like ancient spirits awakened from a long slumber. Suddenly, I felt it again, the faintest whispering on the edge of my awareness. A chorus of voices layered over one another, their words blending into a chilling symphony of anxiety and sorrow. "Help us," they seemed to plead, echoing through the gloom. "You won't let us go?" Fear wrapped around my chest like a vice, squeezing tighter with every syllable. I couldn't tell where the voices were coming from, yet they felt close, too close. I took another hesitant step, bracing myself for whatever might lurk in the shadows. In the distance, I could make out shapes, muffled forms that seemed to shift just beyond the range of my vision. My breath hitched as I summoned the courage to approach them. I needed to know who or what awaited me here. As I moved deeper, the temperature dropped, and I could see my breath fogging in front of me. The air was heavy with a musty scent, filling my lungs with decay and neglect. I stumbled into something cold and rigid and quickly recoiled. It was a table covered in dust, with old trinkets scattered atop, rusty keys, broken glass, and locks, all remnants of a past long forgotten. I felt like a trespasser in a place where memories shouldn't linger. Setting my flashlight on the table, I examined the items closely, searching for any clues. A sudden clattering made me jump, the sound echoing in the vastness. I turned sharply, but nothing moved. Just shadows mocking my fear, taunting me with their silence. My heart raced, and I bit my lip, forcing myself to remain calm. That's when I saw it, a figure materializing out of the darkness, its shape flickering like a candle flame in the wind. I squinted, but I couldn't discern any features. It was as if my mind refused to believe what my eyes were seeing. The figure stepped closer, and I could feel the air around me growing colder, saturated with an overwhelming sense of dread. "You shouldn't be here," it whispered, its voice a chilling breeze that wrapped around me. "They've been waiting." Instinctively, I took a step back, but I tripped over something solid and fell to the floor. As I landed, the flashlight rolled away, its beam illuminating the room for just a moment. I caught glimpses of faces, pale, hollow eyes filled with desperate longing, mouths open in silent screams. They hovered just out of reach, their expressions twisted in anguish as if they were trapped behind an invisible barrier. I scrambled to my feet, my heart pounding against my ribs like a caged animal. I needed to escape, to find a way out of this nightmare. In my frantic search, my flashlight flickered and sputtered, barely illuminating the terror surrounding me. I reached for it, hoping to recharge my fading courage with its light. The voices grew louder, their cries overlapping in a haunting blend, pushing me closer to panic. "Don't listen to it," one voice shrieked. "You must go." Another, softer yet more urgent, pleaded with me to stay. Confusion engulfed me as I shook my head, desperate to block out their torment. I turned back to the figure, who hovered, watching me with an intensity that sent a chill down my spine. "They won't let you leave," it said, and its words dripped with a deep, unsettling sadness. "You must choose. Choose." My voice trembled, and I gulped, trying to process its meaning. "Choose what?" Its form flickered again, and for a brief moment, I saw something that looked strikingly familiar. A reflection of myself, twisted into a sorrowful visage. "Will you save them, or will you save yourself?" Before I could reply, the floor beneath me groaned, and the shadows thickened, swirling around my feet like a tempest. The room shook as if protesting my presence, and I felt the cold grip of despair tightening around me. "Make your choice," the specter commanded, its voice echoing like thunder in the confined space. I staggered back, overwhelmed by the weight of my decision. The faces around me, those souls trapped in torment, reached out, fingers curling as they begged silently for release. Against my better judgment, I thought of the journal and the family's secrets, how they had been shackled to this place. Perhaps this was my chance to break their curse and find a way to free them. With steely determination, I gritted my teeth and met the figure's gaze. "I will save them," I said, my voice trembling but resolute. The specter smiled, a sad, twisted smile that sent chills racing down my spine. "Then you must find the heart of the house." It raised a hand, pointing to the darkness beyond. "Follow the cries. They will guide you." With no time to hesitate, I turned, following the echoing voices that thrummed in my mind. The path ahead felt endless and wrong, filled with an underlying sense of dread that threatened to swallow me whole. As I moved forward, claws of darkness grasped at my ankles, tugging me back. I pressed on, sweat trickling down my spine. The cries grew stronger, more desperate, feeding my urgency to push ahead. I felt the weight of their hopes and fears colliding within me, each pleading whisper pulling me deeper into the abyss. Finally, I approached another door, weathered and ancient, the words carved into the wood barely visible. I could hear the cries clearer now, a cacophony of emotion pouring through the cracks. My hands shook as I reached for the doorknob, taking a deep breath to steady myself. Then I turned the knob and pushed the door open, the old hinges creaking in protest. What lay beyond was a room full of faded memories, old toys strewn about, a child's laughter lingering like a ghost in the air. In the center of the room sat a large, ornate chest, its surface engraved with intricate symbols similar to those I had seen in the locked room. The room felt alive, buzzing with energy, like it was waiting for me to discover the secrets locked within. I stepped inside, my heart racing with anticipation and dread. It was a sight that tugged at my soul, inviting me closer. I approached the chest, and as I reached for the lid, an icy wind swept through the room, extinguishing the remaining light. Darkness enveloped me once more. The voices returned, louder and more frenzied. "Open it! Open it!" they cried, an urgent chorus that echoed around me. With a trembling hand, I lifted the lid. The air turned thick and heavy as I peered inside. What I found there was unimaginable, a swirling mass of shadows and light, a chaotic whirlpool of past and present, history and horror. Within that tempest, I saw flashes of the family, their faces twisted in agony and relief, caught between two worlds. But there, at the very center, lay an object, the heart of the house, pulsing as if it were alive, its essence intertwined with the fate of everyone who had come before me. Just then, I heard a voice that cut through the chaos, a child's voice, innocent and hopeful. "Please help us." My resolve hardened. I would not let fear dictate my actions any longer. I reached into the depths, feeling the warmth of the heart against my palm. In that moment, everything changed. The shadows recoiled, and the room burst with color and light. The voices became a symphony of gratitude and hope, swirling around me like a gentle breeze. The figures began to materialize around me, their expressions shifting from anguish to peace. As the heart pulsed, it enveloped me, an embrace of warmth that flooded my being. The weight of the family's suffering lifted, and in that heartbeat, I understood the truth of their stories, their sacrifices, and their fears. My heart resonated with theirs, as if their pain had become part of my own. I opened my eyes, the room transforming into a dazzling landscape. The child stood before me, a radiant smile illuminating her face. "Thank you," she whispered. "You set us free." With one final pulse, the heart shattered in brilliant light, sending waves of warmth and healing throughout the space. The shadows retreated, dissolving into nothingness, and I felt a sense of release unlike anything I had ever known. But deep down, I knew this was only the beginning. As the last echoes faded, a new sound caught my attention, the unmistakable click of a door opening, a promise of light returning. A glimmer of hope surged through me. I turned to see a bright path unfolding beyond the room, inviting me onward. But as I stepped through the doorway, I couldn't shake the feeling that this house still held more secrets, waiting to be unearthed, more stories tangled in the shadows. Whatever lay ahead was uncertain, and the whispers of the past would always be with me, guiding me to my next discovery. But as I stepped through the doorway, I couldn't shake the feeling that this house still held more secrets, waiting to be unearthed, more stories tangled in the shadows. The bright path wound through a narrow corridor, dimly lit by flickering bulbs that emitted a ghastly yellow light. I hesitated, glancing back at the radiant chamber I had just left, the soothing warmth still lingering on my skin. But deep down, a gnawing curiosity propelled me forward, beckoning me into the unknown once more. As I walked down the corridor, the air grew heavy, thickening with a scent that reminded me of damp earth and something far more sinister. The walls seemed to shimmer and pulse, as if the house itself was alive and breathing, its heartbeat matching the rhythm of my own. I pressed onward, wondering what other horrors this place had hidden away. Suddenly, a strange noise caught my attention, a faint scratching sound that came from my right. I paused, straining to listen, my heart thumping loudly in my chest. The noise grew more insistent, like something clawing at the walls, desperate to get out. "What is that?" I whispered, half expecting an answer from the shadows. The scratching stopped, only to be replaced by a low, guttural growl that crawled up my spine, sending icy fingers of fear dancing across my skin. It resonated through the air, vibrating against my chest. My instinct screamed at me to turn back, but there was an undeniable pull that urged me to press forward, to confront whatever awaited me. Stepping cautiously toward the source of the sound, I spotted a door slightly ajar. It was small and old, the wood warped and splintered, a sense of foreboding spilling from its cracked edges. I pushed the door open, heart racing. The moment I entered, a wave of cold air washed over me, darker and heavier than before. Shadows flickered along the walls like unseen eyes watching my every move. The room inside was cluttered with forgotten relics, broken furniture, tattered curtains, and a layer of dust that blanketed everything. In the center stood a cage, rusted and decrepit, as if it had not been touched in decades. Its metal bars were twisted, knotted around each other like serpents frozen in a fight. I felt an overwhelming urge to approach, even as dread pulsed through me. Inside the cage, something shifted. My breath caught in my throat as I leaned closer to glimpse what was trapped within. At first, it appeared to be nothing more than shadows swirling and writhing. But as my eyes adjusted, I realized there was something else, something human. A pale figure crouched in the farthest corner. It was gaunt, skin stretched tight over bones, and its eyes were wide and hollow, reflecting a haunting terror that struck deep into my core. The figure stared at me, mouth moving slightly as if trying to speak, but no words came. "Help me," it whispered through chapped lips, voice hoarse and raspy. "Please." The desperation in its pleas sent waves of panic washing over me. Who was this person? How long had they been trapped here? I felt drawn to them, but I couldn't shake off the chill creeping up my spine. I took a tentative step forward, looking for a way to free them, but the lock on the cage looked advanced, like it held secrets of its own. "Don't," it rasped, voice trembling with raw emotion. "You have to leave?" "What? Why?" I stammered, glancing around, feeling eyes on me from every direction. "I can help you." "No." The figure lunged forward, hands clutching the bars, eyes wide with terror. "You don't understand. The thing outside wants you. It feeds on fear." A low growl rumbled just outside the door, vibrating through the air with a bone-chilling resonance. I felt the shadows closing in, the very air thickening with malevolence. The figure's face twisted in horror as it realized what was coming. "You have to go now," it cried, "before it takes you too." My instincts kicked in, but the urgency in the figure's voice rooted me to the spot. I hesitated, staring into those sunken eyes, torn between fear and a desperate need to save. Suddenly, the growl turned into a spine-chilling snarl that echoed with a mix of hunger and rage. In that moment, frantic urgency took hold. I stumbled back, bumping into the cage and collecting myself. I couldn't face whatever lurked beyond. "How do I escape?" I shouted, panic rising in my voice. "The key!" The figure screamed, panic-stricken. "In the drawer! Get the key!" I turned, heart racing, and rushed towards the cluttered surface of a nearby table. My hands fumbled through the dust-covered items, scattering papers and trinkets in a frenzy. I threw aside a broken doll and a rusted clock, searching desperately for the key. Time felt like it was slipping away, the snarl lingering just beyond the door, each moment stretching into an agonizing eternity. Finally, I spotted something shiny nestled between a stack of faded books. My heart thudded in my chest as I snatched it up, a tarnished key, cold and heavy in my palm. "Quick, now!" the figure urged, voice laced with urgency. I dashed back to the cage, my hands shaking as I inserted the key into the lock. It turned with a satisfying click, but before I could push the door open, the growling grew louder. I felt icy breath brushing against the back of my neck as I pulled the cage door wide open. "Thank you," the figure gasped, stumbling out, but the moment it stepped onto the floor, the air turned electric. A twisted shadow emerged from the darkness, coalescing into a grotesque form, all jagged edges and hungry eyes. The figure turned, face twisted in panic. "Run!" I barely had time to react as the shadow lunged forward, closing the distance far too quickly. The air crackled with its presence, intoxicating fear washing over me. I felt the chill seep into my bones as I turned and sprinted down the corridor, adrenaline propelling me forward. Footsteps thundered behind me, and I dared not look back, the very sound of its pursuit sending chills down my spine. With every pounding heartbeat, it felt closer, shadows stretching and warping around me, trying to ensnare my feet. I burst into the corridor, desperate for any semblance of escape, and scanned the areas around me. The walls felt like they were contracting, shadows twisting menacingly, almost alive. My eyes darted wildly, searching for a refuge or a way out. Suddenly, I remembered the path illuminated by light, hoping it would lead me to safety. But the growl became an echo, reverberating in my mind, shaking my determination. I sprinted forward, the light growing brighter, yet feeling out of reach. The corridor seemed to stretch endlessly, every sound amplified, the clawing shadows reaching for me as I stumbled forward. As I neared the end of the corridor, I saw the light radiating in a doorway ahead, its brightness almost blinding. I poured every ounce of my speed into the last few steps, terror in my back and hope in my heart. Just as I reached for the door, a cold grip latched onto my ankle, wrenching me to the ground. I screamed, fighting against the pressure that dragged me backward. I clawed at the floor, heart racing as I struggled to break free, but the shadows held tightly, relentless. "Please, let go," I cried, desperation flooding my voice, the light in front of me flickering like a dwindling flame. And then all at once, the shadows released their grip, and I tumbled forward, crashing through the doorway and into the blinding light. The moment I broke through, everything shifted. The room felt alive, pulsing with warmth and energy, contrasting starkly with the darkness I had just escaped. I scrambled to my feet, gasping for breath as I turned around to face whatever had pursued me. The shadows halted at the threshold, swirling and writhing, dissolving into the air as if the light itself had chased them away. I was safe, for now, but I couldn't shake the weight of what I had witnessed. I turned to take in my surroundings, the light illuminating strange symbols on the walls, echoes of the family's pain still lingering. Whatever had chased me was still out there, lurking in the shadows of this cursed place, and I felt the chill of its hunger gnawing at the edges of my mind. The realization struck me like a bolt of lightning. This wasn't over. The heart of the house might have been freed, but the true darkness lingered, waiting for something, somewhere within these walls to awaken once more. Taking a deep breath, I steeled myself. I had to uncover more secrets hidden within this place before my time ran out. I moved forward into the light, knowing that deeper truths awaited, shadowed by the screams of those lost in darkness. Each step carried its weight, anticipation heavy in the air, as I prepared to delve deeper into the mysteries of the haunted house, where every corner held potential horrors and forgotten histories, waiting for someone to reveal their terrible truths once again. Taking a deep breath, I steeled myself. I had to uncover more secrets hidden within this place before my time ran out. I moved forward into the light, knowing that deeper truths awaited, shadowed by the screams of those lost in darkness. As I stepped further into the room, I noticed strange symbols etched into the walls. They glowed faintly, pulsing in rhythm with my heart. The air thrummed with unspoken energy, filling me with a sense of urgency and dread. I felt like I was standing at the edge of a precipice, teetering between knowledge and oblivion. Gingerly, I approached the closest wall, tracing my fingers over the markings. They felt warm, alive, and an unsettling current coursed through me. The symbols seemed to change under my touch, rearranging themselves into images, faces twisted in pain, eyes filled with despair. "What are you?" I muttered, stepping back as a chill threaded through my spine. Suddenly, the lights flickered violently, plunging the room into darkness for a heartbeat. Panic surged through me, and I instinctively reached for the flashlight in my pocket, fumbling for its beam. When the light flared back to life, I gasped. The faces on the wall were gone, replaced by a mirror reflecting my own terrified expression. But my reflection wasn't alone. Behind me stood a shadowy figure, indistinct but watching. My breath caught in my throat, fear coursing through my veins as I swung the light around, illuminating the space around me. There was nothing there, only emptiness. "You're losing your grip," a voice whispered from somewhere deep within the shadows. My skin prickled, the noise echoing in my ears, taunting me. Desperate to drown out the whispers, I turned to the next wall, eager to find something that would explain the madness consuming this place. As I examined the markings, a cold breeze suddenly swept through, chilling me to the bone. The air grew thick and heavy, swirling around me as if something unseen was drawing closer. Without warning, a chilling laugh erupted from the darkness, reverberating off the walls. My heart raced, and I stumbled backward, nearly falling. The laughter felt almost familiar, like a memory I couldn't grasp but somehow recognized. "Why are you so afraid?" the voice mocked, a teasing tone layered with malice. "You are just like them." I shook my head, fighting against the suffocating sense of dread. "Who are you?" I shouted, my voice echoing into the void, desperate for an answer. "I am what you keep hidden." My stomach twisted, realization dawning like an unwelcome dawn. The shadows danced at the edges of my vision, and the laughter melded with the sound of distant, muffled cries. The walls seemed to melt and shift, revealing more sinister symbols, a labyrinth of despair that threatened to swallow me whole. Suddenly, a door creaked open within the room, long hidden in the shadows. It was old, its paint peeling and rusted iron hinges protesting against the darkness. The sight sent a shiver racing down my spine, but curiosity pulled me closer regardless of the fear clenching my heart. I could feel an unnatural chill radiating from the passage beyond, something ancient and dark beckoning me to enter. I hesitated for a moment, unsure of what lay beyond, but the laughter echoed in my mind like a sinister lullaby, pushing me to step forward. Holding my breath, I crossed the threshold, plunging into the unknown. The hallway was narrow, with low ceilings that seemed to close in around me. The walls were damp and covered in what looked like mold or decay, giving off a rancid smell that assaulted my senses. As I crept deeper, I noticed that the air felt different here, dense, charged with an energy that made my skin crawl. And then I saw them, faces emerging from the walls, materializing as I stepped nearer. They were ghostly apparitions, their mouths moving soundlessly, eyes wide with unending terror. I pressed a shaking hand against the wall, feeling a pulsing warmth beneath my fingertips. "What happened to you?" I whispered, heart pounding as a wave of sadness washed over me. Nobody answered. Instead, the eyes of the specter seemed to follow my every move, their silent cries echoing around me. It felt like they were reaching out, trying to tell me something important, a warning lost in the currents of time. I turned away, forcing myself to keep moving, but the whispers grew louder, filling my ears with their torment. I stumbled into a larger chamber, the air thick with tension. A circle was drawn on the floor, covered in strange symbols that pulsed with a sickly green light. In the center lay an altar, its surface stained dark with some long-dried fluid. "Leave now," a voice hissed, and I turned to see a figure lurking in the corner, its features obscured by shadows. "Who are you?" I demanded, my voice trembling but filled with determination. "It isn't safe here," they warned, stepping into the light. Their face was gaunt, eyes hollow and sunken. "You mustn't disturb what's been put to rest." A glance at the altar made my blood run cold. "What is this place?" "This was once a sanctuary," the figure murmured, grief etched into their features. "Now it's a prison, a place where souls are trapped, feeding the darkness." Before I could respond, chill swept through the room like a sudden gust of wind. Shadows morphed and shifted, swirling around the altar, their movement frantic and chaotic. I could feel the darkness pressing against my skin, wrapping around me like an unwelcome embrace. "You shouldn't have come," the voice said again, desperation seeping into their tone. "It will come for you if you do not leave." "Oh, what is it?" My voice rose, panic rising with it as I stumbled back toward the entrance. The darkness does not tolerate intruders, they screeched, greenness reflecting in their eyes. In an instant, the shadows lunged forward, snapping like hungry jaws, the air crackling with energy. All I could hear was the pounding of my own heart as I turned and sprinted back down the narrow hallway. The space felt alive with malevolence, shadows clawing at me, pulling me back. "Get out!" the figure's voice screamed, echoing through the darkness, and I could hear the whispering of the lost souls behind me. "Run!" I raced back through the corridor, the growl echoing behind me, building in intensity. The shadows closed in like a wave, hungry and relentless, urging me toward the light. I burst into the previous room, heart racing, but the laughter filled the air once again, now layered with mockery and glee. Clutching the flashlight tightly, I scanned the space. The mirror still reflected my terrified visage, but the thing lurking behind me was now visible, a twisted amalgamation of shadow and darkness, its eyes burning with a sadistic hunger. I stumbled back, desperately searching for a way out. The walls shifted, closing in, the air crackling with an unsettling energy. "What do you want from me?" I shouted, backing away. "I want to play." It hissed, twisting and writhing, an amalgamation of fear made flesh. I could almost feel its clawing fingers reaching for my soul, the sensation sending fresh waves of terror coursing through me. "Not like this," I gasped, feeling the weight of despair closing in. "This isn't a game." The creature laughed, a sound that chilled me to the bone. "To me, everything is a game, an endless game." Desperation clawed at me, and I swung the flashlight across the room, seeking some way to dispel the horror surging forward. The light flickered, and for a split second, I saw a door behind the creature, slightly ajar, the soft glow from the other side beckoning like a siren's call. I had to get to that door. With renewed determination, I dashed toward it, my feet pounding against the warped floor. As I rushed past the darkness, the creature lunged, its breath icy on my back. I felt its presence closing in, tendrils of shadow reaching for me. But I burst through the doorway, feeling the light envelop me as I crossed the threshold. But the light flickered, threatening to extinguish as I stood in another narrow tunnel, similar to the one I just left behind. There was no safety, only the echo of the growling darkness that threatened to swallow me whole. "You can't escape," the voice echoed from behind me, sending a wave of dread crashing over me. I turned, knowing the hunt wasn't over. Each step brought me closer to uncovering the truth, or sealing my fate forever. With sheer terror propelling me, I charged deeper into the tunnel, desperately clinging to the faint hope that somewhere, somehow, I could find a way out. Gripping the flashlight, I moved through the darkness, knowing that whatever lay ahead in this house of horrors would test the very core of my being. The passage felt like a living thing, constricting around me as I pressed on. Bare beams of light struggled to break through the oppressive gloom, distorting shadows that sprang and fell at the edges of my vision. Murmurs, indistinguishable yet chilling, danced through the air, curling around me like fog, taunting and teasing. I could almost hear snippets of conversation, snippets of lost souls warning me, imploring me to turn back. But turning back felt like death itself. I had to know what lay ahead. There had to be a reason for all this, a reason I was drawn into this cursed space. My heartbeat echoed in the silence, drumming a frantic rhythm that matched my growing anxiety. With every step, I felt the weight of unseen eyes upon me, a presence always just at the edge of my awareness, lurking in the shadows. The walls of the tunnel narrowed, pressing in, and I pushed forward, my pulse racing. That's when I noticed the first real sign of something sinister, a bloodstain smeared along the floor, dark and ominous. My stomach turned, realizing it was fresh, glistening in the light. I hesitated, my flashlight beam shaking as I held it up, trying to peer further into the murky depths. In the dim light, I saw a door, barely hanging on its hinges, cracked open as if inviting me in. A heavy sense of dread washed over me, but I had no choice. Curiosity clenched my gut tight, urging me to move closer, each step echoing like a warning in my head. I reached for the doorknob, cold as ice against my palm, the wood creaking softly as I pulled it open wider. Inside stood an old, musty room, filled with something that felt almost alive, a low hum resonating from the walls. Strange artifacts littered the space: shattered mirrors, old photographs sizzled with sulfurous shadow, and an antique crib that looked far too new amidst the decay. Its delicate frame shone eerily in the dim light, as if welcoming misery, a whisper of forgotten childhood. As I stepped inside, the air thickened, swirling around me like a storm. My skin prickled with electric energy, and an overwhelming urge urged me to flee. I forced myself to stay, focusing on the crib. I crept closer and peered inside, the light casting haunting shadows that danced like specters. What I saw made my blood run cold. A soft, quilted blanket lay neatly folded, but it was the sudden movement that caught me off guard. Something shifted beneath that blanket. My heart raced as the covering shifted again, a small hand suddenly reaching out, small fingers grasping at the air. It was primordial, instinctual fear clawing at my throat. I stumbled back, thudding against the wall as confusion and terror clenched together in my gut. "Who's there?" I stammered, my voice barely a whisper, trembling and frail. The blanket fell away, and in its place was the vacant expression of a child, wide eyes staring back at me, devoid of warmth or life. I froze, caught in the gaze of something profoundly unearthly, an emptiness that seemed to echo with the sorrows of the damned. In a mere instant, the laughter returned, cruel and mocking, filling every corner of the room with an oppressive weight. I felt like prey, surrounded by unseen hunters, each heartbeat a countdown to my doom. I turned to flee, but a wave of energy slammed against me, wrapping around my limbs and pulling me back. "I can't be here," I gasped, stumbling toward the door, the oppressive atmosphere thickening around me. Yet as I looked back, the child was gone, replaced by the unsettling glow of the artifacts, their eyes seeming to bore into my very soul. I had to escape. The whispers grew louder, coiling around me with insidious intent. I flew past the remnants of lost innocence and back into the hallway, the shadows shifting ominously as if alive with rage. Behind me, I could hear the sound of tiny feet padding softly, following but never approaching, the air standing still with deceptive quietness. The thought of that presence sent a chill down my spine, encouraging me to push ahead. What haunting fate would seize me if I lingered too long? My instinct screamed at me to run, but terror had a way of slowing time, making every second stretch into an eternity. I rushed through the twisting tunnels, finding another door, but this one was firmly shut, wood cracked and weathered, a warning in its very presence. My hands flew to the knob, desperation driving me as the shadows felt closer, slick tendrils sliding around me. I banged against the door, heart pounding, and pushed with all my might, the wood shuddering but refusing to yield. Panic settled in. The pressure from behind intensified, forcing me to scream as I felt the darkness closing in. "Let me out!" I shrieked, body trembling. Just then, the door gave way, bursting open to reveal a darkened study, its ancient furniture draped in heavy sheets of dust. The comforting mess of the room contrasted sharply with the dread lurking behind me. I stepped inside, swiftly shutting the door before glancing around, desperate for safety. In the dim light, I noticed a desk covered in faded papers, the ink blurred and smudged. I approached, trembling hands brushing lightly against the cluttered surface, searching for something, anything useful. But as I rifled through the documents, I felt cold fingers trailing along my neck. I gasped, spinning around, but nothing was there, just the heavy air and the eerie silence pressing in. My heart thundered, and I tried to focus, forcing myself to ignore the creeping insanity that threatened to take hold. Then I noticed something glimmering on the floor, a small key, glinting under the muted light. I picked it up, feeling its weight in my palm, a sudden sense of hope sparking within me. What door could it unlock? I turned back toward the room, scanning for potential exits, but everything seemed locked down tight. My breath quickened, and I could hear the whispers again, growing louder, a cacophony of tortured voices blending into one thin thread of panic that pulled at me. A sudden realization struck. I had to return to the child's room. Somehow, the key felt pivotal, like it was a slice of fate waiting to be used. With renewed resolve, I dashed back into the hallway, flashlight beam illuminating my path as shadows crawled and flickered. Every step resonated with the whispers around me, their urgency mingling with my racing pulse, urging me onward. I reached the door where I had encountered the child, my heart crashing against my ribs. The shadows churned, almost resisting my presence as I fumbled for the lock. The key slid in smoothly, turning with a satisfying click that echoed ominously in the stillness around me. Please let this work. I breathed against the mounting dread, pushing the door open again. The room felt almost alive, waiting for me to breach its depths once more. As I stepped back inside, the emptiness echoed with an unsettling tension, making the air feel thick and unyielding. The moment I crossed the threshold, silence enveloped me like a shroud, stifling and heavy. And then, the child appeared again, but this time it was not alone. Shadows danced wildly around the room, swirling, pulsing with malevolence, and the darkness reformed around the crib, creating grotesque shapes, each one a memory trapped within this hellish space. "No!" I whispered, freezing in place, unable to comprehend the horrors manifesting before me. Each shadow morphing into a wretched visage, their eyes pleading, mouths opening and closing in muted cries. It was a culmination of despair, an endless cycle of souls caught in torment, repeating a haunting melody of grief. The child's eyes, wide and gleaming, locked onto mine, and its tiny mouth began to move. "Help us," it mouthed, the voice barely a whisper, yet powerful enough to cut through the chaotic noise in the room. I stumbled backward, panic crashing over me like a tidal wave. "How can I help?" I asked, voice trembling. "Find the heart of the darkness," the child whispered again. In that moment, everything shifted. The shadows thickened, billowing outward and swallowing the room in a cacophony of screams. I could feel them pulling at me, trying to consume my very essence. I couldn't breathe as the room spiraled into a vortex of despair, bursting with sound and fury. It felt like all the spirits were trying to escape, clawing for freedom, and I was at the center, the epicenter of this swirling chaos. "No!" I shouted, holding onto the key tightly, as if it were my only lifeline. "I have to find it. I'll save you." And with that vow echoing in my mind, I stumbled through the storm of darkness, searching for a way to unleash the hearts captured, bound within this sinister nightmare, hoping beyond hope that my determination could somehow ignite a spark in this all-consuming void. The search for the heart had begun, and the true battle against this house of horrors was far from over. The search for the heart had begun, and the true battle against this house of horrors was far from over. I squeezed the key in my hand, feeling its cool metal bite into my palm as I scanned the cavernous space. Shadows writhed and twisted around me, their features forming grotesque shapes, an army of the damned trying to break free from the darkness. I could feel their anger, their sorrow. It hung in the air like a heavy fog, stifling my breath. The child's voice echoed in my mind, urging me forward, igniting a flicker of hope in the suffocating shadows. I turned back to the room, desperation flooding my veins, searching for anything that might guide me to the heart. I looked at the crib, at the remnants of childhood purity corrupted by this place. A sense of dread settled deep in my stomach, but I pushed it down. I had to believe there was a way to release them all. With fumbling fingers, I began to examine the room more closely. My eyes caught sight of a small chest, tucked in the corner, half illuminated by the beam of my flashlight. It was old and ornately carved, its surfaces etched with symbols similar to those that adorned the walls. My heart raced as I approached it, each step filled with trepidation as the whispers grew louder, urging me to turn back. I knelt beside the chest, feeling drawn to it like a moth to a flame. The air grew thick, pulsating with anticipation, and somehow I knew that the answers lay within. Forcing myself to breathe, I pulled the lid open. It creaked in protest, a a sound like the agonized groan of a trapped soul. Inside, I found old trinkets drenched in darkness, worn toys, cracked porcelain figures, and pieces of paper covered in sharp, spidery writing. My fingers trembled as I sifted through the remnants, looking for something, anything, that felt significant. But then a strange sensation crept over me. The air changed, becoming dense, and out of the corner of my eye, I noticed something shifting in the shadows. I whipped my head toward the darkened corner and saw it. A figure cloaked in darkness, its form indistinct yet somehow familiar. It loomed there, watching me. I felt a cold sweat trickle down my spine as I swallowed hard. "Who are you?" I called out, trying to mask my fear with bravado. The figure didn't reply, just continued to stare, an ebony silhouette broken only by the spark of its eyes, glinting with maleficence. I turned back to the chest, heart racing, desperate to find the heart suggested by the child. Among the twisted remnants, something caught my eye, a small, gleaming object nestled beneath a pile of dust. I unearthed it with shaking hands, revealing a locket, its surface worn but undeniably beautiful. The glow it emitted seemed to pierce through the darkness, dancing with potential. A strange warmth flooded through me as I held it aloft, illuminating the room like a beacon. Suddenly, the ambient whispers crescendoed into a rising wail. The shadows stretched and twisted. "You shouldn't have found that," the figure hissed, its voice a low rasp, like dry leaves scraping against one another. The air charged around me, crackling with energy, filling me with dread. "That locket holds the truth you do not wish to know." Ignoring the voice, I opened the locket, revealing a faded photograph of a young girl, her smile radiant yet haunting. My pulse quickened as a rush of memories flashed before my eyes, flickers of laughter, warmth, and then a deep chill steeped in melancholy. I felt a connection, a certainty that this girl was part of the nightmare, the tragedy that unfolded within these walls. "Tell me," I demanded, heart hammering against my ribcage as the figure took a step closer, the air around it swirling with darkness. "What happened to her? What do I need to do?" "You won't survive what lies ahead," the figure warned, its voice dripping with malice. "The heart is not always what you think. It's the source of pain, and the darkness will not let you leave." I shook my head, brushing aside its ominous words. "I can't leave her here," I screamed, refusing to be deterred. "I have to help." With each beat of my heart, the shadows grew restless, creeping along the walls, whispering secrets lost to time. Something stirred deep within me, a desperate need to confront this darkness, to face whatever malevolent force clung to this place. Feeling empowered, I shoved the locket back into my pocket and prepared to move forward, but before I could, the ground trembled beneath me. The walls seemed to shift, muscles of stone flexing and groaning, as if the very house had come alive in anger, its breath heaving in apprehension. "Foolish child," the figure snarled, its form flickering like a candle in the wind. "You do not understand the price of your desire. The heart resides where fear festers and binds." In a surge of renewed terror, I stumbled back, realizing that the ground below me felt wrong, a vibration pulsing beneath the surface. I dropped to my knees, pressing my palms against the floor, taking in the subtle heat radiating from below, surely originating from whatever unspeakable horror lay deeper in the bowels of this forsaken place. Then, all at once, the shadows erupted around me. They coiled like a serpent, wrapping around my arms and legs, trapping me in a suffocating embrace. I fought against them, heart racing, but their grasp was too strong. I could feel their icy fingers digging into my skin, drawing closer, filling me with despair. I gasped as the locket slipped from my pocket, dropping to the floor, emitting a soft glow that cut through the darkness. The figure screeched, the sound piercing and primal, as if the very essence of terror encapsulated within it was forced to confront the light. "Don't!" it howled, the shadows retracting slightly, momentarily releasing their grip. "You cannot face the heart. You are not strong enough." But I couldn't listen. I could feel the energy churning, pulsating with anger and fear. I reached for the locket, lighting the way, heart pounding as I swung it around me like a shield. The shadows hissed, writhing back from its glow, and I called out once more, my voice steadying with determination. I will find it. I will save her. With renewed vigor, I stood, ignoring the frantic whispers clamoring for my attention, drowning out the fears that threatened to grip me once more. I pushed forward through the blurred shadows, guided by the soft light of the locket. I needed to find the heart, the source of all this pain. The room before me shifted, revealing a narrow staircase that spiraled down into an abyss. I could feel the bitter chill emanating from it, and the shadows seemed to beckon, promising unspeakable horrors below. But it also felt right. This was where I needed to go. Taking a deep breath, I descended the staircase, each step sending ripples of fear through my veins. The air grew colder, heavier, and the sound of my footsteps echoed like the tolling of a death knell. As I reached the bottom, I found myself in a vast chamber, dark and foreboding. Fragments of light flickered around the edges, revealing a massive stone altar at the center, encrusted with dark crystals that pulsed rhythmically, as if replaying the heartbeat of this house of horrors. The moment I entered, the temperature dropped sharply, and a suffocating dread clung to the air. An unsettling hum filled the space, resonating with an otherworldly energy. I stepped closer, the locket glowing fiercely against the surrounding darkness, illuminating the jagged spikes and twisted forms that snarled out of the altar. Above this altar, a swirling mass of shadows merged and danced, creating a vortex of anguished faces, their mouths opening in silent screams. Terror flooded over me as I realized. These were the lost souls trapped in this realm, unrelenting pain etched upon their features. What is this place? I breathed, frozen in place as the essence of grief and sorrow enveloped me. I could hear the cries, feel the weight of despair pressing against my chest. They are bound to the heart, a soft voice called from the shadows. It was the child again, appearing just ahead of the swirling mass, its expression a mixture of sadness and hope. You must free them. How? I gasped, heart racing as fear threatened to overwhelm me. The heart is the key, the child whispered. You must face it, embrace the darkness instead of running. Only then can you sever its grip on these souls. I swallowed hard, grappling with the possibility that this darkness wasn't just an external force but something within me as well. I felt it lurking, my own fears, my own regrets, everything I had pushed deep inside, forgotten in the light of day. With a deep breath, I stepped toward the altar, each footfall radiating with the weight of what I was about to confront. The shadows recoiled slightly, and the hum intensified, a fierce growl resonating from the pulsating heart at the center, the very essence of despair drawing me closer. I couldn't turn back. I had to do this. My fingers brushed against the dark crystals, feeling their chill seep into my skin, and suddenly visions flooded my mind, memories of loss, of sorrow, all the things I had buried and tried to forget. The pain pressed upon me, overwhelming in its intensity. I closed my eyes, struggling to breathe, but forcing myself to stay grounded. I had to face every single regret, every fear that had held me captive for so long. And then, as if a dam broke in my mind, I began to relive the darkness. The moments I felt weak, the times I let fear dictate my actions, the people I had lost and blamed myself for. The cries of the lost souls enveloped me, their suffering becoming part of my own, each breath a reminder of the pain I had so desperately tried to escape. "No more!" I shouted, my voice echoing in the abyss, resonating with strength. No more hiding. The moment I opened my eyes, I firmly grasped the locket in my hand, holding it high. Its glow intensified, pushing against the shadows that writhed in anger, and I felt power surging through me, igniting my resolve. I accept my fears. I embrace the darkness to reclaim the light. The swirling mass turned chaotic, and the wails of the trapped souls rose, tearing at the very fabric of the room. But with that declaration, the shadows began to pull back, shrieking and struggling against the power of the locket. I felt the energy shift as the heart of despair itself flickered, the tendrils of darkness breaking apart, revealing glimpses of the souls within. Faces that had once been filled with hope, now twisted by torment. I could sense their longing for freedom, feeding my own. The altar shuddered, crystallized edges fracturing as light burst forth, washing over the room in a purifying wave. The shadows hissed, writhing against the onslaught, and I held the locket tighter, willing its power to cleanse the agonized ties holding these souls captive. "Be free!" I cried, tears streaming down my face as memories surged and the locket's light enveloped everything around me. The shadows began to dissipate, the cries rising to frantic crescendos as figures emerged from the depths of darkness, radiant and free. One by one, the faces I glimpsed transformed, some smiling, others weeping with relief as they ascended. I felt warmth coursing through the room, and for each soul released, a weighted burden lifted from my own heart. I had faced my internal darkness, wrestled with it, and now it was melting away. I did it, I whispered in awe, witnessing the last wave of shadows retreat even as the room pulsed with energy. But just as hope blossomed within my chest, I felt a cold chill wash over me. The shadows retreated, yes, but I sensed something darker lurking within the remnants. A single figure loomed closer, growing larger with each passing second. A presence that reeked of malice and the wounded bitterness of unresolved pain. With its form twisting and contorting, it unfurled the last shreds of darkness, a grotesque parody of a figure that radiated malice and despair. It absorbed what was left of the shadows, growing stronger, with laughter that echoed deeply, shaking the very foundation of this place. "You think you have one?" it taunted, voice resonating like a thunderclap, deep and rumbling. "I will not let you win," I shouted back, heart swelling with courage. "I have the power of those I freed. You can't have me." In that desperate moment, I felt the lingering warmth of the light surrounding me, bolstered by the souls who had been freed. They were with me now, their essence fusing into my own. I could hear the lingering cries fade into whispers, leaving me with the lingering cries fade into whispers, leaving me with a powerful resolve. I could sense the presence in front of me shifting, its form flickering like a candle in a draft. My heart pounded as I faced this embodiment of malice, the shadows still alive with pain and fury. I could feel a palpable tension thrumming in the air, thick and suffocating, as the creature's laughter broke through the darkness. It was a sound that sent chills down my spine, mocking me, echoing ancient horrors I could hardly fathom. "You think you can defeat me?" It sneered, its voice twisting like a serpent. "I am the darkness you have always feared. I am a part of you." I gritted my teeth, refusing to let doubt creep in. "You're just a reflection of what I refuse to face. You don't own me." As I spoke, the shadows around me pulsated with fury, their energy swirling into a tempest, propelled by the creature's anger. It surged toward me, a black wave intent on drowning me in despair. My instincts screamed for me to retreat, but I stood firm, holding the locket tightly in my hand. The moment felt electric, a pulse vibrating through the air, as if the house itself was holding its breath. With a fierce shout, I thrust the locket out before me, brightening the space with its fierce glow. "You will not take me." The light expanded like a shockwave, colliding with the encroaching darkness. For a second, everything was frozen, a stark contrast of light battling shadow. The creature recoiled, its form wavering as the brightness threatened to engulf it. But the darkness wasn't finished. With a deafening roar, it coiled back, expanding and swirling violently around me, lashing out like a creature unchained. It reached for me, cold tendrils snaking up my arms. I gasped, feeling a frost settling in my bones, suffocating and wrong. Are you so sure your light can save you? It hissed, the shadows twisting into grotesque faces, sneering and jeering, a multitude of voices merging into one cacophonous chant that echoed in my mind. Embrace the truth. You are merely prolonging the inevitable. Each word felt like a dagger, digging deep into my heart. And I knew the creature spoke from the depths of my own insecurities, the guilt I had buried, the memories I had tried to forget. I could feel myself wavering, caught between the light of the locket and the suffocating weight of the darkness whispering my deepest fears. But just as despair threatened to swallow me, I thought of the souls I had released, of the child, of the pain they endured for far too long. The spark of hope reignited in my chest, and I clenched my eyes shut. I will not let you win. You are nothing but a coward. Feeding off fear, I shouted, drawing strength from the flickering light of the locket. In that instant, I plunged deeper into my own memories, feeling the rush of grief and sorrow as I confronted the truths I had hidden away. Reliving that pain, I faced it head-on, every moment of loss teaching me something new, every shadow showing me who I was. And suddenly, the locket burned bright, light radiating fiercely from my heart as I opened my eyes to see the creature reeling, its form distorting with rage. "What are you doing?" it roared, the darkness thrumming violently, struggling against my burgeoning light. "I am not alone in this," I replied, voice echoing with a newfound clarity. "I carry their strength with me." With those words, the locket blazed like a sun, exploding in a fierce brilliance that shattered the cocoon of shadows. The light erupted into a spectrum of colors, washing over the room, illuminating every corner, banishing the darkness that had once felt impenetrable. The creature shrieked, a sound that vibrated through the very fabric of the house. It writhed and twisted as the light enveloped it, its tendrils disintegrating, swirling up into the ether. I could feel the power of every soul I had released spiral around me, their collective energy invigorating my own, amplifying it until I felt invincible. "Be gone!" I commanded, thrusting the locket forward, sending a shaft, piercing through the heart of the darkness. The creature's anguished wail reached a deafening crescendo before it dissolved into millions of tiny shards that scattered like dust in the wind. Then suddenly silence fell. The oppressive weight lifted, replaced by an eerie stillness that left me trembling. I stood in the center of the chamber, gazing at the remnants of shadows that now lay dormant, reduced to mere echoes of their former selves. But the moment of triumph was fleeting. As I caught my breath, I noticed that the chamber still seemed shrouded in a vague gray twilight, as if the light had yet to fully reclaim the space. The altar glimmered softly, the dark crystals now dull and lifeless. My heart raced when I heard an unsettling sound, like the low scraping of something heavy sliding across stone, coming from the shadows at the edge of the room. I turned towards it, dread pooling in my stomach. "What now?" I whispered, panic creeping back into my chest. The walls murmured secrets, shuddering at the break in the silence, as if the house itself was waking up, aware that its darkness had just been challenged in some way. From the far corner of the chamber, a figure began to materialize, shrouded in the remnants of darkness. My breath caught in my throat when I saw its features, half-formed and grotesque, as if it had been stitched together from the leftovers of other shadows. It loomed closer, the energy around it crackling with a sinister intent. "No!" I gasped, backing away instinctively, searching for any way to escape. The figure's eyes, two burning coals, fixed on me with an intensity that made my skin crawl. "You should not have disrupted the balance," it whispered, the voice a corrosive mixture of anger and sorrow. "You think you have defeated me? I am the keeper of this house, the guardian of all its secrets." I felt the tremor of fear shake my bones, my body screaming to flee, but I forced myself to stand firm. "I'm not afraid of you," I declared, but the bravado felt hollow against the chilling aura of the creature. "You will be," it replied, lunging toward me with a speed that made my heart race. In a flash, it slashed through the light, enveloping me in cold darkness once again. I gasped, feeling the air sucked from my lungs. The locket glimmered dimly in my grasp, its power flickering like a dying star. I closed my eyes and envisioned the warmth I had felt before. The locket's glow surged again, igniting against the suffocating shadow that threatened to consume me. In desperation, I focused on every soul I had freed, every ounce of light I could summon. I envisioned their faces, their hopes and dreams, drawing strength from them, channeling it through my heart and into the locket. "Enough!" I shouted, feeling the energy crackle in my fingertips. I opened my eyes, unleashing a burst of brilliance that exploded from the locket, illuminating the chamber in an ethereal glow. The creature screamed as the light struck it, a sound so full of rage and despair that it felt as if reality itself was shuddering. Shadows swirled around us, crackling like a thunderstorm as the chamber began to vibrate with the force of our clash. "Your darkness has no power here," I shouted, forcing every ounce of will into the locket. "You are nothing but a remnant, a figment of this house's twisted nightmare." The light surged forth, battering against the shadow's form, chasing it into the corners and threatening to pull it apart. I felt the energy from the locket swell, the heat radiating from it pushing back against the consuming void, pushing me to stand my ground. But the figure wasn't merely retreating. It twisted and writhed, morphing into different shapes, throwing its power against me in desperate waves. Each time it lunged, I imagined the warmth of light, clinging to the strength I had found within myself. With every surge forward, I felt more resolute, tearing through the weight of despair. "Let go of this place," I demanded, heart racing as the shadows began to peel away, revealing remnants of the house fading into the light. The air crackled around me, filled with shards of energy bursting forth like fireworks, the culmination of battles fought and futures regained. With one final push of will, I sent forth a beacon of light that exploded into a kaleidoscope of colors, shattering the lingering shadows around me. There was a moment of stillness, a pause where the universe held its breath. And then the creature howled as the light engulfed it completely, its form dissolving into nothingness. The echo of its rage faded into a gentle whisper, carrying with it the agony of those bound to the darkness for far too long. I stood there, breathless, surrounded by the remnants of the confrontation. The chamber was glittering now, the air vibrant with energy, the darkness washed away, replaced by a warm glow that filled every crevice. The locket pulsed softly in my hand, a reminder of the strength I had found, the light I had embraced. I could feel the souls of the freed once more, their whispers of gratitude echoing in the corners of my mind like a soft lullaby. But as the tension subsided, I knew this wasn't the end. The house still held its secrets close, and even in the complete stillness, there was an unsettling sensation, like a heartbeat beneath the floor, a sound echoing from the bowels of the earth, pulsing slowly yet steadily. Curiosity gnawed at me, mingling with the remnants of fear as I approached the altar once more. I stared at its shadowed surface, waiting for a sign, for a hint of what would lie ahead. The light from the locket still flickered, bathing me in warmth, but dread tightened around my chest at the thought of more darkness hidden beneath. I took a deep breath, taking a step closer, and as I did, the air shifted again. A low, rumbling growl resonated from below, and then the ground shook violently, swallowing my fear momentarily with shock. I stumbled back, the locket's glow flickering ominously as the entire house seemed to shudder in protest. "What now?" I whispered, holding tightly to the locket, determined not to be swallowed by the growing void beneath me. The echoes of souls were leaving me, a bittersweet farewell as I braced myself for whatever lay ahead. The heart of the house throbbed, its pulse matching my own, and in that moment, I realized that it was still waiting, still longing to reveal its deepest secrets. I took another step forward, resolute in my quest. The shadows may have retreated, but I had no intention of leaving this place without understanding what truly lay at its core. "Show me," I called out, my voice steady despite the trembling fear racing through me. "I am ready to face whatever truth you hold, whatever dark heart still beats within this house." The lights flickered, the shadows danced around the edges as a path began to reveal itself, leading further into the heart of the house. And with my determination set, I forged ahead, ready to uncover the depths of the darkness, knowing that each step would lead me closer to answers, and perhaps to another battle against the unseen horrors that awaited the depths of the darkness awaited. With each step, I felt the heaviness of the air press down on me, thick with an unseen dread that coiled around my legs, trying to pull me back. Shadows flickered just out of the corner of my eye, twisting and writhing like hungry serpents, waiting for the right moment to strike. The house creaked, ancient wood groaning as if warning me against venturing further. I paused for a moment, peering into the lingering darkness ahead where the faint light of the locket barely penetrated. Then, the floor beneath me trembled again, but this time it was different. Instead of a shudder, it felt almost as if something beneath was stirring, awakening from a long slumber, and that realization sent a jolt of icy fear racing up my spine. I pressed forward, determined despite the growing sense of foreboding that wrapped tighter around me. As I stepped into a new chamber, the air grew colder. A dim glow filled the room, but it wasn't comforting. It was sickly, a greenish luminescence that cast eerie shadows across the stone walls. I saw strange symbols etched into the surfaces, pulsating faintly as if they were alive. The walls seemed to constrict and stretch, bending like the spine of some ancient beast, whispering secrets in a language I could not understand. A low thumping sound echoed from the depths, a rhythmic heartbeat that matched the dread racing in my chest. I felt it reverberating through the floor, a slow thrum that beckoned me closer, urging me to listen, to understand. My breath quickened as I felt the locket grow warm in my grasp, sensing perhaps that it was warning me of the horrors that lingered in the shadows. As I approached the far wall, I noticed a door, warped and twisted, as if it had been forged from gnarled roots and the remnants of forgotten dreams. It was ajar, a sliver of darkness beckoning me inside, whispering promises of truths long buried. I hesitated, my fingers brushing the cold wood, feeling its texture like the rough skin of some monstrous creature. Just then, a rush of wind blasted through the chamber, slamming the door wide open. My heart leaped into my throat as icy air rushed in, bringing with it a cacophony of whispers, unintelligible but urgent, as if the spirits of the house were trying to warn me. The green light flickered, illuminating the darkness behind the door, revealing glimpses of twisted shapes lurking just beyond the threshold. At that moment, fear threatened to envelop me whole, but I forced myself to remember why I had come. I had already faced demons, both external and within, and I wouldn't let this place strip me of my resolve. I took a deep breath, steeling myself, and stepped through the threshold into what felt like the very heart of the house. Inside, the air felt electric, charged with a dark energy that prickled against my skin. The door slammed shut behind me with a deafening bang, sealing me in. I whirled around, heart pounding, only to find myself surrounded by a room lined with mirrors, each one reflecting warped versions of myself. Figures grinning and twisting, their eyes dark and hollow. I stumbled backward, the disorienting reflections twisting my sense of reality. Each mirror showed me different versions of myself, some hinting at my deepest fears, recollections of things I had done, moments I regretted, and choices that haunted me. One mirror reflected a scene of me turned away from someone I loved, their face a mask of hurt and betrayal. Another showed me lurching through a storm, only to be engulfed by darkness, the very fear I had fought against creeping back in like a thief in the night. "No," I gasped, steadying myself against the cool glass of one mirror, the surface rippling like water. I slammed my fists against the glass, but it felt strangely soft, like it wanted to pull me in. My heart raced, realizing that these images were meant to distract me, to break me down. I forced my gaze away, focusing on the steady pulse of the locket in my palm, its warm glow piercing through the suffocating darkness once more. From the corner of my eye, I caught a glimpse of movement beyond one of the mirrors. A shadow darted past, dark and fleeting, and my heart leaped into my throat. It was quick, almost shrouded in darkness, and then it vanished. I turned my head, desperate to catch a glimpse, but as soon as I moved, it was gone, leaving only pulsating silence behind. "Show yourself," I shouted, my voice ringing louder than I intended. "I know you're here." In response, the shadows thickened, coiling tighter, and from behind the mirrors, I felt a cold breath, a breath steeped in malice and unfulfilled desires. It circled around me, a wreath of darkness that hummed with chaos as if a storm were gathering, ready to unleash fury. Suddenly, a cry broke the stillness, piercing through the walls. It was a sound filled with anguish, echoing in my bones, a ripple of dread that settled in my gut. I spun around, desperately searching for the source. The mirrors wavered violently, reflecting a world in turmoil, and beneath the tumult, I sensed something ancient, something primal lurking just out of sight. A voice crept through the air, soft and enticing. "You seek the truth," it whispered, the sound slithering around me like ivy, wrapping tighter and tighter. "All truths carry burdens, but only the brave can uncover them." I clenched my jaw, pushing back against the fear gnawing at my resolve. "I will face whatever I must," I replied, trying to sound braver than I felt. "I won't let you overwhelm me." But the voice merely chuckled, a chilling sound that seemed to vibrate through the very walls. "Bravery is not without price, child," it hissed. "Every soul bound here carries a piece of the truth with them, a piece of darkness that cannot be ignored." As it spoke, the mirrors began to shatter one by one, a cruel sound like laughter echoing through the room as shards rained down around me. I dodged and ducked, feeling the sharpness whiz by, each fragment reflecting flickers of madness, horrors, and visions of despair as they scattered. Instinctively, I raised the locket before me, its glow expanding to protect against the darkness swirling around. The shattered glass dissolved into tendrils of smoke, swirling upward before forming into figures that lurched towards me. Figures that looked disturbingly familiar. They reached out with hollow eyes and anguished faces, whispers of regret pooling around them. I recognized them now, the remnants of the souls I'd encountered in this place. Their voices rose in a tumult of pain and sorrow, echoing my past mistakes, weaving a tapestry of anguish around me. "You cannot escape your fate," they cried in unison, voices layered in a discordant melody that filled my ears with despair. "We are bound to you, and you to us." "No!" I shouted, fighting against the tide of emotions crashing over me. "I am not your prison." But with each word I spoke, the figures grew stronger, pushing against the light of the locket as if trying to smother it. I felt their pain wrap around me like chains, pulling me into the depths of despair where light could not penetrate. My breath came in ragged gasps as the weight of their sorrow bore down on me, threatening to crush the last remnants of hope I carried so fiercely. And then, from the center of this chaos, I realized they weren't just lost souls. They were reflections of my own grievances, each one a manifestation of my fears and regrets. I had thought I was here to save them, but in truth, I was here to confront my own darkness, to let it unravel so I could reclaim my light. "Enough!" I shouted again, this time with more conviction. "I accept my past. I will not be defined by my mistakes." The shadows froze, and for a moment, everything hung in the balance. The locket blazed with renewed light, illuminating the room with a fierce glow. The figures faltered, their mournful faces flickering as they hesitated, caught in the clash between despair and the power of acceptance. "Join me," I implored, desperate to bridge the gap between us. "Together, we can find peace. I have faced this darkness, and I can help you too. Let it go, and be free." The flickering shadows coalesced, wavering as they paused to listen, their anguished cries softening into whispers of uncertainty. I felt the connections between us, a web of shared pain that bound us tightly in this dark space. In that moment of stillness, I sensed a collective yearning, a desperate longing to break free from the chains they had carried for so long. They were waiting for someone to guide them, to help them see that acceptance was the key. And I realized then that I had the strength to pull us all through the darkness. With every ounce of will, I opened my heart and let the light of the locket shine brighter than ever. "Let go," I cried. "Release the pain and embrace the light. We can all find our way out together." As I spoke those words, the energy shifted. A collective surge of warmth flowed through the room, quelling the darkness with a soft radiance that enveloped us all. One by one, the figures began to dissolve, their anguished faces softening, transforming into expressions of gratitude as they stepped into the light, leaving behind fragments of despair and regret. I watched as the souls rose higher, enveloped in warmth, taking pieces of their pain with them as they ascended into the brilliance. I felt their joy wash over me, filling me with a sense of relief I hadn't anticipated. But just as I thought the darkness in this chamber was finally breaking away, the air shifted again, cold and biting. A shadow flickered in the corner of my eye, more sinister, its form twisting like a nightmare. The warmth I had felt began to wane, replaced by a chilling silence that settled around me, thick and suffocating. From deep within the darkness, a deeper, more menacing voice roared, drowning out the remnants of the freed souls. "You think you have defeated them so easily? I am not so easily cast aside." I turned quickly, dread coiling in my stomach as I faced this new manifestation of darkness. It rose from the depths, a massive, formless shape with eyes that glowed like dying embers, threatening to consume all that I had fought for. "No!" I shouted, clenching the locket, which still burned with the light of acceptance. "I won't let you take this from me." The creature let out a low growl, reverberating through the chamber, shaking the walls like thunder. "Fools are those who believe they can challenge the essence of despair. Your light will falter. I shall devour it whole." It lunged forward, a dark mass enveloping everything in its path, tendrils stretching out like grasping hands, eager to extinguish the flame I had ignited. The locket trembled in my grip, light flickering like a candle against the wind. In that terrifying moment, I realized I had no choice. I had to confront this darkness not just with light, but with every truth I had accepted, every painful memory I had unraveled. It was time to fight, to summon the strength of all those I had freed, to stand against this overwhelming storm. "I will not back down," I roared as the shadow approached, my heart pounding with adrenaline. I embrace my truth and every part of my darkness. "You have no power over me." The locket shone like a beacon, scorching the air around me with its brilliant light. The darkness halted, hissing in fury as I gathered my breath and energy for this final confrontation. There was power in acceptance, power in understanding my fears rather than running from them. With a fierce determination, I thrust my hands forward as the confrontation reached its peak. Light erupted in a blinding flash, cascading through the room, forcing the shadows back. The creature shrieked, a sound that resonated with all the anguish it had absorbed over the centuries, a cacophony of lost hopes and remorse. But I stood firm, and with each wave of light, I felt the darkness shatter around me, felt the tendrils of shadow begin to fray and dissolve. I was no longer just fighting for myself. I fought for every soul that had been trapped within this house, every person seeking redemption, every moment of pain that deserved to be freed. The confrontation reached its apex when the last wave of light collided with the creature. In an explosion of brilliance, the chamber erupted in shards of incandescent energy, the very foundation of despair trembling beneath our feet. The creature shrieked one final time, a horrible cry that echoed through the chamber and faded into nothingness, leaving an eerie calm in its wake. As the dust settled, I stood amid the remnants of shadow and light, panting heavily, the locket pulsating steadily in my palm. I had come so far, faced so many horrors, yet here I was untouched, standing at the center of a room that felt forever changed. The shadows no longer clung to me like they once did, but their remnants still hovered in the corners, like quicksilver, shifting and waiting for an opportune moment to strike. As the silence thickened, I took a tentative step towards the door I had entered from, ready to find my way back out of this confounding place. Yet the air felt heavier now, swirling with unseen eyes that seemed to watch my every move. An unsettling sensation crept up my spine, and I could hear those whispers again, slithering through the air like cold fingers, taunting me with half-formed thoughts. "Why not stay a little longer?" the voice echoed, dripping with sinister amusement. "You think you've won? The true darkness is just beginning." I froze, pulse racing, heart pounding like a war drum in my ears. There it was again, the menacing presence that I had thought I defeated. The familiar chill enveloped me, a suffocating embrace that sought to pull me back into the depths of despair I had fought so hard to escape. My mind raced. Was I truly done battling my own shadows? Determined not to let fear dictate my actions, I spun around, desperately grasping at the edges of my fragmented courage. "I won't let you haunt me anymore," I shouted, voice echoing in the cursed quiet. "You are nothing but a figment of my past. I can break free." But the air grew still. Those shadows around me began to pulse, thickening with malice. Tendrils coiled outwards, weaving through the room like dark smoke, inching closer. I could feel the temperature drop, a biting chill that seeped into my bones. The unnatural darkness morphed, reshaping, solidifying into grotesque figures that towered above me. Shadows of my deepest fears, laced with memories I couldn't suppress. Each figure had a face, familiar yet distorted. The nightmares of my life manifested before me. I recognized the disappointment in my father's eyes, the cold gaze of a friend betrayed, and the hurtful smirk of someone I had wronged. They all looked down at me, accusing and silent, their mouths moving as if trying to speak, but producing no sound. Panic surged within me. "This can't be real," I stammered, backing away, my voice laced with desperation. "You're not real." But I could feel their presence bearing down, the weight of their sorrows mixing with mine, creating an almost tangible darkness that enveloped the room. I was suffocating, trapped in a cage of my own making, every moment of regret closing in. I squeezed the locket tighter, its warmth a small comfort against the rising tide of despair. "Face your reflection," the voice continued, dripping with venomous delight. "Face the truth you've hidden." With every heartbeat, the figures moved closer, their shadows elongated, clawing at me with skeletal hands, urging me to confront the very fears I wished to escape. "Your truths have shape, and they will consume you if you don't embrace them." I turned to flee, but found the door I had entered through had vanished. The walls pulsed, breathing with an unnatural life, a blood-red glow seeping from the cracks, illuminating the horror surrounding me. The figures laughed, a sound twisted with despair, a cacophony that sliced through the air like a knife. "No, you won't take me," I screamed, my voice no longer steady, cracking with the weight of dread. I faced them, every accusation circling my mind. Each blow of betrayal once felt like an insurmountable weight. But here, as I stood in the epicenter of this turmoil, I realized I was both the victim and the perpetrator. I closed my eyes, a flood of memories crashing over me, my choices, my failures. But within those recollections, I felt sparks of resilience, the moments that had brought me here, the triumphs that dared to exist alongside the failures. "I am not this darkness," I shouted, adrenaline fueling every word. "You may be parts of my past, but you do not define me." The figures hesitated, the laughter fading as I stood resolutely against them. I focused on the light of the locket, imagining it expanding, filling the room with warmth, gradually piercing through the suffocating blackness that sought to entrap me. In a sudden flash, the glimmer illuminated the shadows so brightly that they recoiled, hissing in agony. Suddenly, a new sound appeared, an echo, long and haunting, as the shadows began to shriek in protest. Their faces contorted in anger and pain, twisting into hideous masks that showed disdain for my defiance. The bright light pushed them back, giving me room to breathe. "You may haunt me, but I will not be chained by you," I said, and with those words, I thrust the locket forward, unleashing a burst of energy that rippled through the darkness, splintering the shadowy figures one by one. They writhed and twisted, flickering in and out of existence, each burst of light sending a shockwave of energy through me. I felt their power diminish, and the weight that had threatened to crush me began to lift. The laughter turned to shrieks of anguish and rage as they were consumed by the purity of light flooding the space. With everything I had, I hurled the locket into the center of the chaos, watching it explode in a dazzling radiance. Light consumed the remnants of darkness, heating the cold air, warming the chill deep within my chest. I could feel the shadows disintegrating, their grasp loosening as they dissolved before my eyes. As the last of the figures dissolved into nothing, I collapsed to the ground, gasping for breath. The air felt lighter now, almost sweet. I could sense the echoes of lost souls fading, the weight of their pain lifting into the ether. I raised my head, my heart racing but filled with an unfamiliar exhilaration. Yet it wasn't completely over. The air still crackled with energy. I could sense that something larger, something more sinister, lurked beyond the veil. I could feel it watching, waiting to strike as if the house itself held its breath, anticipating my next move. The ground beneath me began to tremble again, sending ripples through the room as cracks formed in the walls like spider veins. A low, rumbling sound resonated, more powerful than before, vibrating under my feet as if the house were alive, angry, and refusing to release its grip. "Get out!" A deep, guttural voice whispered from the depths, the kind of voice that penetrated the soul, filled with ancient despair. "You have freed the lost, but the true darkness still slumbers. You must leave now." The urgency in that voice sent ripples of fear through my spine. The walls started to bend, the very fabric of the house distorting with a menacing intent, as if it were preparing to crush me under its fury. Panic seized my heart. The sense of urgency intertwined with the very essence of fear surged through me. I scrambled to my feet, searching for the way out, but the shadows danced along the walls, forming into grotesque shapes that seemed to mock my efforts. They flickered and writhed, coalescing into a new, more sinister entity, a towering shadow that slipped like smoke behind the wavering light. "Leave now," it hissed, its voice like the rustling of dead leaves. "The house will not let you go so easily." With every ounce of determination coursing through my veins, I took a deep breath and turned toward where I had come in. I could see glimpses of light filtering through the edges of what had once been the door, but now it had shifted, warped into a pulsating barrier that flickered as the darkness energy swirled around it. "Stand your ground," I told myself, forcing my legs to move forward. "You've faced the darkness before. You can do it again." Racing towards the warped door, I felt the air grow thick around me, pushing against my body with every step. The monstrous shadow inhaled deeply, the glow of the room diminishing as it began to swell in size, becoming a monstrosity of fury and despair. It surged toward me, eager to engulf me in darkness once more. The ground trembled violently, and the locket in my hand radiated fiercely, urging me to unleash its power one last time. Ignoring the terror swelling inside me, I grasped the locket tightly. "I am not afraid of you," I shouted, willing all my light to flow into the heart of the shadow. "You cannot have me." In that moment, a bright beam erupted from the locket, blinding and fierce, slicing through the murky air like a sword. The darkness howled, a sound of immeasurable rage as it recoiled against the light, attempting to shield itself. But I pushed forward, thrusting the light into the heart of that darkness, willing it to explode with all the grief and shame I had absorbed, all the trauma I had faced over the years. The locket pulsed angrily, an entity all on its own, bathing the room in a brilliant glow that fought back against the suffocating shadow. The confrontation surged as the house responded to the battle, walls quaking, fissures cracking the floor beneath me. I had to hold on, but terror clamored at the edges of my mind, begging me to turn back. I focused on the light, calling upon every ounce of strength, every soul I had freed, their energy intertwining with mine. In a final surge of brilliance, the pair collided, the light exploding against the dark mass, an earthquake of luminescence sweeping through the room, dissolving the very air around me. The shadow shrieked, a cacophony of sound and fury that shattered glass, rattled the walls, and ignited something primal within the house. I was hurled back against the wall as the energy screamed through the space like a tempest. The walls began to crack and splinter, dark remnants evaporating in a fierce wind that swallowed the shadows whole. I struggled to my feet, breathless amidst the swirling debris, and stumbled toward the flickering light at the threshold. I could feel the edges of the house collapsing, the darkness struggling to remain intact against the light's relentless push. As I reached the doorway, the last remnants of the shadow melted into the ether, a shadowy mist dispersing like smoke. I could feel the energy shifting, the oppressive weight lifting, and for an instant, the house let out a sigh. And then, I leaped through the threshold, heart racing, barely escaping as the door slammed shut behind me, sealing off the darkness from my world. I barely registered the cold air outside as I stumbled into the moonlight, collapsing onto the grass, gasping desperately for the sweet night air. As I lay there, staring at the stars, tears streamed down my cheeks, not just from exhaustion, but from the overwhelming flood of emotions. I had faced the shadows, battled the darkness within, and somehow emerged unscathed, though I knew that a part of me still reflected those struggles. But the weight of the house still echoed within me, a reminder that the journey wasn't over. The darkness may have retreated for now, but I could feel its remnants lingering around the edges of my consciousness. A part of me wondered if I would ever be completely free from that weight, or if it would forever remain a thread woven into the fabric of my being. I took deep breaths, the night air filling my lungs, and made a silent vow to confront these pieces of myself, to embrace every facet of my journey, light and dark. As I lay there under the vast sky, I knew that I had the power to turn those shadows into strength. The fight was far from over, but I had finally started to reclaim my place in the world, ready to face whatever awaited on the horizon. As I lay on the cold grass, my heart still racing, a shiver coursed through me, chilling for more reasons than just the night air. I could still feel the thrumming energy from that dark house, an echo of its malevolence lingering around me. Every part of my body screamed to get as far away from that place as possible, yet part of me felt drawn back, as if the house was still calling out. I rolled over, glancing back toward the looming silhouette of that ancient structure, its windows glinting like dark eyes staring back at me. For a moment, I thought I glimpsed movement, shadows shifting behind the cracked panes, flickering like candlelight dancing in a ghostly wind. My breath caught in my throat, and a dread crawled through me as I propped myself up on my elbows. Is anyone still in there? My voice was barely above a whisper, laced with a mixture of curiosity and fear. I didn't want to believe that something was left trapped within those walls, unable to escape as I had done. I sat up, the grass damp under me, and listened intently. The graveyard silence that surrounded me felt uncanny, absent of the usual night, sounds like chirping crickets or rustling leaves. Instead, a hollow breath emanated from the house, deep and resonant, almost human, as if the structure itself was alive, breathing heavily, waiting. Suddenly, A cold wind rushed past, swaying the trees surrounding the yard, and in that fleeting moment, I thought I saw a figure standing just inside the doorway, a shadowy silhouette draped in darkness. My heart raced as it began to move, gliding just beyond the threshold like a wisp of smoke curling toward freedom. "Stay away!" I shouted instinctively, my voice echoing into the night, laced with a mix of fear and anger. It paused, tilting its head as if considering my words. A wave of cold washed over me, and I felt a bond between us, a shared understanding perhaps. But then the figure surged forward, dissolving into the crushing darkness of the house. Panic spread through my veins like ice. I scrambled to my feet, ready to run, but my legs felt heavy, as though the earth itself was holding me back, anchoring me to this cursed ground. Something wasn't right, and I could feel it deep within me, a witching intuition that something worse lay beyond those walls, waiting, lurking just out of sight. The wind picked up again, this time viciously rattling the branches around me, carrying with it the faintest whispers that curled around my ears like tortured moans. I couldn't make out the words, but the tone sent chills cascading down my spine, urging me to listen closer, to heed their call. I squinted, the light of the moon illuminating the entrance to the house, and saw that the door had creaked ajar, inviting me back into the abyss. With my heart racing, I closed my eyes and remembered everything I had just faced. The luminescence that I had unleashed to push back the darkness wasn't just a momentary escape. It had ignited something within me, filling me with purpose. Yet, as much as I wanted to run, dread clung to my mind like a shadow. I stepped toward the house, my instinctive trepidation battling with a fierce need to confront whatever awaited within. "You're stronger than this," I told myself, gripping the locket tightly against my chest. As I pushed open the door, the air inside was heavier, thicker, like stepping into the depths of the ocean. The stale scent of rot swirled around me, and I could see nothing beyond the threshold but shadows indistinguishable from the blackness that clung to the corners. A low groan reverberated through the walls, almost a greeting, but also a warning. I took a step inside, and the floorboard creaked underfoot, creating a discordant sound that echoed ominously into the abyss. I strained my ears, and amidst the disquiet, I could hear it, a soft sobbing, like the whimpering of a child, desperately clawing its way through the darkness. "Is someone there?" I called out, my voice shaking, stronger than I felt. The sobbing paused, the silence wrapped around me tightly, and I felt the floorboard shift beneath me, as if the house itself was considering my presence. In the dim light from the fading moon, I caught a flicker of movement, a fleeting shape darting behind a wall, weaving like a shadow in the night. Heart pounding, I pressed further into the gloom, feeling the walls closing in, each step sending tremors through the wood. "Please, if you can hear me, I want to help," I cried, the plea feeling futile as soon as it escaped my lips. The atmosphere thickened, swallowing my words before they could reach the unseen source of the cries. I turned toward the source of the sound, heading deeper into the rotting heart of the house. With each footfall, a low, rasping voice emerged, sickly sweet, luring me deeper. "Come closer. I know your fears. I can show you what you hide." It sent a shiver down my spine, but also compelled me forward, further into the house that seemed to breathe and pulse like a living thing. Suddenly, a crash echoed from the far end of the hallway, followed by an insistent rattling as if a door was being pounded upon by unseen hands. Fingers trembling, I reached for my phone, turning on the flashlight and illuminating the dark corridor. As the beam cut through the shadows, I caught fleeting glimpses of shapes darting away, dark figures flitting between the doorways, hiding just out of reach. The sobbing resumed, now mixed with laughter, a cruel melody that echoed off the walls and wrapped around me like a serpent. "Show yourself," I demanded, though the tremor in my voice betrayed my fear. A cold draft swept by, extinguishing the light from my phone temporarily, wrapping me in an unsettling darkness so profound that it felt like a living entity. My breath quickened. I felt pressure rise within me, as if the shadows were trying to siphon away my strength. Then the sobbing crescendoed into a wail, a terrifying sound that clawed at my sanity. I stumbled backward, the light flickering back to life just as I turned to run. The shadows erupted with movement, coiling around me, a tide of darkness that sought to drag me back. Instinct took over, and I bolted down the hallway, gasping for breath, desperation fueling my speed. I can't be trapped here again. The words echoed in my head like a mantra, pushing me forward. But their laughter filled the air, mocking and vile, clawing at my resolve as I reached a doorway at the end of the hall. My heart raced when I entered the next room, a nursery, once filled with warmth but now decayed and forgot. 10. At the center lay a crib, eerily intact amongst the decay, and above it hung a mobile, crafted from dark, twisted shapes that danced silently in the shadows. Something felt deeply wrong in this place. As I crossed the threshold, I could see a dim light flickering inside the crib, pulsing in tune with the low sobs that seemed to rise from nowhere and everywhere all at once. As I approached the crib, I realized the source of the light was not a baby but a small, flickering flame, a candle placed carefully among old, crumbling blankets. My heart dropped as I noticed something moving beneath them. "Please, come play with me," a soft voice called from under the blanket, sweet and innocent, but laced with an unsettling edge. Trembling, I reached forward to push aside the tattered fabric, my heartbeat hammering in my chest like a war drum. What I uncovered sent a wave of horror through me. There lay a doll, old and battered, its porcelain face cracked and covered in ash. Its eyes, once vibrant, now seemed alive, swirling and deep, pulling me in with a desperate hunger. I could feel the sorrow emanating from it, drawing me closer as the wailing around me intensified. "Help me find them," the doll whispered, the voice distorted, squeezing a painful pinch of fear in my heart. "They're lost like you lost in the dark." I stumbled back, suddenly aware of the shadows gathering in the corners of the nursery. Tendrils of darkness snaked around, growing thicker, coiling and pulsing as if responding to the doll's call. I could sense the presence of many souls still trapped within these walls, held hostage by a fear that mirrored my own. "No, I'll find a way to help. I won't let you capture me." My resolve surged, and I turned to face the door, planning my escape. Yet, the shadows surged forward, darkness swirling violently, and I realized I had awakened something far more powerful than I anticipated. Before I could react, chaos erupted within the room. The mobile above the crib shattered, the pieces flying across the nursery like shards of a broken mirror, reflecting twisted visions of lost souls, faces contorted with fear, eyes pleading for release. The wailing crescendoed, becoming unbearable, clawing at my sanity, wrapping around me like a vice. I squeezed my eyes shut against the overwhelming horror, trying to block out the relentless cries. But I could not escape the echoing despair, filling the air with echoes that sounded all too real. I felt the shadows extending long fingers toward me, their grip tightening as I struggled, desperate to breathe. "Join us," the voice from the doll coiled around me, seductive and sinister. "Embrace the darkness, and we will carry you home." The walls trembled, old wood cracking as if they shared in this malevolent energy. I stumbled toward the door, but the shadows closed in, and the air became icy and still. "No, I refuse." I screamed against the engulfing tide, summoning all my strength. My fingers brushed against the locket, the warmth flaring in response as I willed the light back into existence. "I am not afraid of you," I shouted, channeling every ounce of defiance into the glimmering heart of the locket. Its light flared brighter, breaking through the engulfing dark and casting stunning beams across the walls. The shadows shrieked and recoiled, but they were relentless, multiplying as if feeding off my fear, growing heavier, pressing down like an unyielding weight. The sobbing doll's voice echoed, now shrill and furious. "You cannot escape. You are one of us." But deep down, I knew I wasn't lost and could not allow myself to be captured by the shadows. I wasn't alone. The souls of the lost surrounded me, their pain wrapping around me like a shroud. Yearning for release echoed through my bones. With every shard of willpower, I unleashed the light of the locket with a fierce cry, forcing it into the dark, illuminating the strains of lost souls screaming for help. "You must let go," I demanded, and in that moment of sheer determination, I felt their collective energy respond, intertwining with mine as the darkness trembled. All at once, the shadows writhed violently, breaking apart under the incandescent surge. The cries erupted into anguished howls, and as a force of bright light erupted from the locket, it lanced through the heart of the shadows. Light pierced through the darkness, illuminating the walls. The decrepit room transformed as the light surged, sweeping the lingering horrors away. "What is this light?" the doll screeched, its form stretching and twisting in shock, frantic to escape the brilliance engulfing its hold. "I will not belong to you," I yelled back, feeling the energy swell within my chest, every terrifying moment colliding with the fear I had pushed through. The shadows fell back, twisting, retreating like vapor under the sun, and with every surge of brightness, I could feel the ethereal souls respond, lifting the weight that held them captive. As the room trembled with energy, the shadows pulsed against the brilliant beam, the cries turning to wails of desperation as they were cast away. One last surge of brilliance erupted, and the room shook violently, the floor buckling beneath me as though the house itself was expelling the darkness. The once heavier atmosphere now felt lighter as I forced the last of my strength into the radiant explosion. With a final gut-wrenching shriek, the darkness fractured, collapsing into itself, dissolving away into the ether, carrying the lamenting souls with it. And then silence fell, thick and heavy. I stood in the aftermath, chest heaving, heart racing, surrounded by the fading remnants of this nightmare. The room, once teeming with darkness, was now bathed in an almost blinding light. It felt impossible, but as I turned to catch my breath, I realized the nursery had morphed. The shadows had retreated, the oppressiveness lifting like a shroud. I could see the outlines of the remnants of toys, but they no longer felt cursed. From the far corner of the nursery, gently creeping through broken windows, moonlight poured in. I felt warmth surge through me as I glimpsed faded memories resting among the toys, the comforting energy of forgotten laughter settling over me like a guardian blanket. As I took a step toward the faded memories resting among the toys, an unsettling chill swept through the room, snuffing out the warmth that had filled the air seconds before. I hesitated, caught in the bizarre contrast between the lingering shadows and the soft glow illuminating the broken toys. Something felt wrong, very wrong, as I noticed the change in the atmosphere, an almost palpable tension that made it hard to breathe. The air grew thick, and the faint scent of decay wafted back into the nursery, overpowering any sense of calm I had begun to feel. I looked around, instinctively drawn toward a pile of once vibrant plush animals, their fur dulled by time, their eyes staring back at me with a mixture of innocence and mourning. I realized it wasn't just my own fear that lingered in this room. No, it was something else, an energy coiling like a serpent, ready to strike. I shuddered but felt compelled to get closer. Suddenly, a sharp creak echoed from above, a sound that reverberated through the floorboards and sent a fresh wave of panic through me. It was a reminder that my battle with the darkness was far from over. "What else lurks here?" I whispered, the sound of my own voice feeling like a trespasser in this house of echoes. The creaking returned, more pronounced this time, accompanied by what sounded like muffled footsteps, distinct and deliberate. "Please don't be like them," a voice called from somewhere in the shadows. It was soft and fragile, yet unmistakably filled with the same sorrow I had heard before. My heart raced as I turned my head. "Who's there?" I demanded, but the voice only echoed back as a sob. Clutching the locket tightly, I braced myself, shifting my focus to the corner of the room. A gleam caught my eye, something metallic nestled beneath a pile of dust. I approached, breath catching in my throat, as I revealed a tarnished key lying half-buried in the remnants of forgotten memories. It felt like it had been waiting for me, pulsing with latent energy, inviting yet treacherous. Had this key once unlocked something sinister? Without thinking, I slid the key into my pocket, my mind racing with possibilities. A gradual pull urged me toward the doorway leading out of the nursery, beckoning me further into the darkness. The air felt murky as shadows twisted around the edges of the room, thick and sentient as if they had a life of their own. As I stepped back into the hallway, the stillness was overwhelming. I gazed down the corridor, which extended ominously in both directions. To my right, I remembered the door I had fled from earlier, but to the left, a sliver of light peeked from beneath another door, the same door that had rattled before. My instincts warned me against this curiosity, but the locket pulsed against my chest, urging me forward. I made my way down the hall, each step amplifying the silence until I reached the door with the sliver of light. I hesitated for a moment, heart pounding, and then pressed my ear against the wood. There was again soft, desperate sounds. This time, they were accompanied by a barely audible whisper, like a leaf rustling in the wind. "Help me!" Hot breath escaped my lips as I turned the doorknob, the metal cold and unyielding beneath my fingers. The door swung open with an eerie creak, revealing a small room filled with flickering candlelight. The shadows danced against the walls, morphing into grotesque figures. In the center stood an ornate mirror, its frame warped and aged, reflecting not just my image but something far more sinister. What stared back at me was not just my face. There were blurred figures behind me, ghastly forms that swirled and twisted. I stumbled back, heart racing, the sense of dread gripping me tighter. The whispered voices grew louder, their urgent tones wrapping around me, compelling me to approach the mirror, to understand what it revealed. But fear pricked at my instincts as I stepped closer. The surface of the mirror rippled like water, swirling with dark colors and shadows. I could see visions flash before me, faces twisted in agony, trapped souls reaching out as though begging for rescue, yet driven by a hunger that leached the very light from the room. "Join us," the voices crooned, seductive and dissonant, sliding into my mind like a poison. "You belong with us." They clawed at my reason, coaxing me to surrender. My pulse thundered in my ears, and the locket began to vibrate steadily, resonating against the wave of despair overhead. "No, I won't let you take me," I screamed, backed against the door as the images grew more intense. The souls trapped within the mirror stretching toward me, their fingers brushing against the glass. It felt like the mirror was pulling me in, like a whirlpool threatening to drown me in despair. Frantic, I tore my gaze away from the horrific scenes and persisted to the back of the room. There I saw something glistening in the shadows, a small box. With determination, I sprinted towards it, ignoring the whispering urgencies that beckoned me back to the mirror's depths. I felt the shadows crawling against my skin, trailing like ivy, but I kept going, each step fueled by raw resolve. As I reached the box, I fumbled to open it, my heart racing not just from fear but from desperation. Inside, I found an assortment of trinkets, broken toys, twisted metal scraps, but at the bottom lay something that sent a jolt of recognition through me. A tiny, tarnished bell that seemed to shimmer in the candlelight. I picked it up, and it rang out with a sound both sweet and chilling, reverberating through the air like a tolling chime. The moment it echoed, everything around me changed. Shadows shrank back as if recoiling from the sound. The whispers turned into shrieks of rage, painfully loud as they erupted from the mirror. "You are ours. You cannot escape." But it was too late. The bell rang again, its tones slicing through the darkness, awakening a fierce energy within me. I realized it was a weapon, a key to breaking the hold they had on me, to sever the chains binding the tormented souls. With newfound courage, I clutched the bell tightly and turned to face the wretched mirror. "Enough!" I shouted, raising the bell high. "You will not take me or anyone else." The mirror pulsed in response, and the shadows writhed, angry and desperate to reclaim their prey. I shook the bell vigorously, the clamor echoing like a haunting symphony that filled the room. The shadows shrieked, the tortured souls writhing against the glass, their faces contorted with grief and rage. I could feel the mirror vibrating, the glass now cracking under the force of the bell's ringing. The air shimmered with electric energy, thick with potential. "You have no power here," I declared, and as the bell rang one last time, the mirror shattered, sending a shockwave through the room. Fragments of glass burst outward, scattering like fireflies, the echoes of lost souls filling the air in a deafening roar. I felt heat surge around me, and in that moment, all darkness fell away. Specters and shadows dissolved, their cries intertwining with a vibrant symphony of liberation, rising above the remnants of anguish. I stood amidst the tumult, watching the shards of the mirror disappear into a brilliant light that illuminated the room. It washed over me, flooding my spirit with warmth as the trapped souls began to ascend, relief washing over their ethereal forms. "Thank you," their voices sang as they dissipated into the vastness, leaving behind only a serene silence. I was left alone in the aftermath, the remains of the malevolent house now crumbling in the corners of the nursery, leaving only the memories to fade away like echoes in the wind. But as I turned to leave, I felt a sudden pull from the darkness that still lingered at the edges of my vision. The dread crept back, whispering promises of despair and cunning intentions. Something was still there, still watching. A gentle breeze rustled behind me, causing the candle flames to flicker. I picked up the bell, cradling it closely to my heart. "You won't win," I vowed silently. But as I crossed back into the hallway, I could feel it, an icy breath across my neck, as if the house exhaled, acknowledging my bravery and relishing in its persistence. A distant echo of laughter haunted my ears, tauntingly close, yet just out of reach. The shadows lingered, and I could hear them calling, dark tendrils creeping back. This isn't over. The realization hit me like a slap to the face. I was not free, even as the other souls escaped. A deeper darkness remained, a root buried deep within the foundations of this house, and it would not let me go easily. With every nerve in my body screaming, I pushed forward into the hallway, but the shadows writhed close behind me, weaving through the air like smoke, searching for a way to consume my light. The laughter echoed again, distant yet chilling, slipping through the cracks and lingering in my mind. "You think you can escape?" it whispered, dripping with malice and mockery. The walls began to pulse, almost as if the house itself was alive, breathing in sync with my racing heart. I felt a tremor beneath my feet, and the floorboards creaked ominously, warning me of the encroaching danger. Shadows crawled toward me, eager whispers flooding my ears. "Turn back," they hissed. "You're not meant to be here." I shook my head, trying to fight off the rise of panic. My legs felt heavy, each step becoming a battle as the darkness fought back, wrapping around me like a shroud. I stumbled, but caught myself, pushing on, determined to reach the front door. The house loomed bigger, twisting in my mind, shifting shapes, blocking my way with every ounce of its sinister power. As I neared the end of the hall, a loud bang resonated behind me, as if a door had slammed shut. I whipped around, eyes wide with terror, every instinct screaming at me to run. But the shadows behind me coiled and writhed, some forming grotesque shapes, others simply reaching out with claw-like fingers, eager to drag me back into their abyss. "Stay with us," they urged, their voices echoing like a haunting symphony. "You belong to us?" "No," I shouted defiantly, words spilling from me like fire. I turned and sprinted toward the front door, the sound of my heart pounding in my ears like a war drum. The air thickened around me, almost choking as I pressed forward, daring not to look back. But as I reached the door, doubt fouled my mind. Would it even open? Would I find my freedom on the other side? Or was it merely another trap? Heart racing, I grasped the doorknob, the cold metal biting into my palm. Just as I turned it, a chill swept through the air. My breath hitched as a wispy figure emerged from the shadows at the end of the hallway. Its face was ghostly pale, features twisted and sorrowful, eyes deep hollows that flickered with the remnants of pain. "Don't leave," it murmured, a sadness washing over its voice that sent icy fingers creeping down my spine. "Please, help us," it begged, reaching toward me, fingers stretching like fragile tendrils of mist. I hesitated, sensing the genuine desperation emanating from it, but the shadows behind me surged with renewed intensity, roaring with rage. "Don't listen to them," they screeched, fury lashing out like a tempest. The room around me darkened as the ghostly figure faltered, its form dissipating into a cloud of gray, only to be consumed by the shadows clawing at the walls. "Make your choice," the darkness yelled, voices merging into a cacophony that rattled my bones. "Free yourself or join the others." My heart raced as the essence of the place pressed down on me, feeling heavier than ever, suffocating in its grip. Desperate to escape, I yanked the door wide open. It swung open with a creak, revealing nothing but the chilling night outside, a black void stretching endlessly. This was not the salvation I had hoped for. It felt more like an invitation to endless despair. "I will not stay," I screamed, fighting against the pull of the dark entities gathering around me. I could feel them clawing at my back, icy fingers brushing against my skin, trying to drag me into their fold. I nearly teetered back toward the shadows. The ground trembled beneath me, warning me of the unfathomable depth of fear lying within. Finally, I summoned every ounce of strength within me. Clenching the tiny bell, I raised it to the air and struck it against the wall with all my might. Its eerie toll rang out, cutting through the thick air like a blade, disrupting the shadows that swarmed like hungry beasts. The darkness shrieked, recoiling from the sound, swallowing their torment in panicked wails that echoed through the house. "Stay back!" I yelled, heart racing as I used the clang of the bell to forge a path through the chaos, stepping out into the outside world. I wasn't free yet, but with each ring, I felt the shadows lose their grip on me. The night sky enveloped me, the air fresh yet tainted with the stench of damp earth and decay. I was outside, yes, but not safe. The forest loomed ahead, its trees twisting ominously in the moonlight, branches reaching out like skeletal fingers. Something deep in the woods began to stir, a dark shape crawling toward me, creeping from the shadows of the trees. "Come back," a voice called from within, dripping with temptation, tugging at my heart, promises of comfort and safety twisted with unrelenting despair. "You can't run from what you've awakened." With every ounce of willpower, I broke my gaze from the darkness, forcing my legs to move, sprinting into the night. The bell rang wildly as I stumbled into the labyrinth of trees, the sounds of the house fading behind me, though the laughter still echoed like a haunting refrain in my mind. Branches scraped against my skin, drawing blood as I ran deeper into the woods, darkness swirling around me, almost embracing me in its sinister arms. The path twisted and turned, disorienting me, and I had no idea if I was running towards safety or deeper into the nightmare. But I could feel the shadows closing in, the howls growing louder, and the pull of the darkness sharpened with every passing second. I felt an ominous presence behind me, an unseen entity swiftly gaining ground, and before I could think, I dashed through the underbrush, heart pounding like a war drum in my chest. The shadows called out, clinging to every step I took, claws just inches from my back, tugging me down into the abyss. Suddenly, I broke through the trees into a clearing. Moonlight spilled over the open space, illuminating the ground, revealing an old stone well at the center. My heart dropped. This was no ordinary well. The stones were worn, ancient runes carved deeply into the sides, whispering secrets of the past as they twisted up to the lip. "Help us!" The voices coiled around me, coming from the well. Echoes of countless souls trapped below, their cries rising like a desperate hymn. The shadows flanked me, swelling with vengeful energy. "You must make a choice," they hissed. "It will only be one of you." The air thickened with dread, and I could feel the well's darkness pull at my very soul. The glowing bell began to dim in my hand, its power waning as the shadows closed in. Time began to blur, and the frightening urges to give in to the darkness clawed at my mind, whispering seductive promises. "Join us." The well echoed with an enticing melody, the voices intertwined beckoning me down the dark void. "You can't escape your fate." Fear threatened to paralyze me, but I remembered the warmth of those lost souls, their desire to be free. I took a step back, adrenaline coursing through me. Would I truly abandon them to the shadows? A wild thought flashed through my mind. Perhaps there was a way to harness the darkness and twist it to my own will. Could I use this sinister energy to save not only myself, but those still trapped? Clutching the bell tightly, I shouted into the well, "I am not afraid of you. I will not abandon the lost." A tremble shook the air, and the shadows recoiled momentarily, as if hit by a sudden wave of light. With that surge of resolve, I approached the well's edge, peering into the black pit below. The darkness seemed alive, rippling and swirling, desperate to ensnare anything that drew near. I took a deep breath, summoning all my strength, then lifted the bell high above my head and rang it with fierce conviction. The sound echoed violently within the well, ricocheting off the stones as if awakening the very spirits held captive. Ghostly forms began to rise, buoyed by the resonance of the bell. They swirled upward, caught within the chime's light, pulling themselves from the depths. I felt their energy mix with mine, and together we formed a beacon against the encroaching darkness. The shadows writhed in fury, howling as their power diminished. They surged forth, desperate and undeterred, clawing at the ethereal light I now commanded. "They cannot be free," the voices shrieked, chaos erupting as the forced unity of souls shattered their hold on me. "You will not take them," I yelled, every fiber of my being igniting with courage. With each ring of the bell, I wove the light to encompass myself, the captured souls, and the well itself. Unleashing everything I had, I forced the light downward, cascading through the darkness as if trying to cleanse the evil that festered in the depths. The well trembled violently, stone cracking. I could feel the energy pulsating beneath me. Shadows swirled chaotically, yanking at my essence, desperate to drag me back into their embrace. I leaned over the well's edge, staring into the swirling darkness below, but this time, I felt sympathy for the souls still trapped. "Together, we will not be lost," I cried as the bell rang one final time, resonating with power. Bright light erupted from the depths, illuminating everything and shattering the remnants of darkness. The well opened wide, releasing an explosion of light that surged upward like a shooting star. In that moment, I felt the house tremble, its very foundations shivering with the release of trapped energy. Shadows erupted in shrieks of terror, billowing outward as if trying to escape the cataclysm, curling up like smoke. The ancient runes on the well shimmered, resonating in harmony with the bell, merging the lost energy of the souls once trapped. I closed my eyes, letting the energy wash over me, feeling warmth envelop my body. The sensation of freedom surged within as I finally felt the house surrender, the hold on my spirit slipping away. "You cannot take us?" I declared, and with that, the shadows dissolved into the night, swallowed whole by the force of the light. The bell rang one last time, and as its resonance faded into silence, I realized the oppressive weight had lifted. The air felt clear, the suffocating dread replaced with a profound stillness. With unsteady breaths, I looked towards the well, its dark depths now filled with a soft glow that pulsed like a heartbeat, a promise of freedom for those who had once been trapped. Standing alone in the clearing, I felt both exhausted and renewed, knowing the battle might be over, but the scars of this place would linger. The house, now stripped of its malevolent grip, seemed almost to sigh in relief as the sun began to rise, painting the sky in hues of gold and pink. But somewhere deep within, I sensed the lingering presence of darkness, lurking just outside the edges of my vision. The journey through this haunted realm had changed me, awakened something buried inside. I knew the shadows were not truly gone, merely waiting for another chance to snare their prey. And as I turned toward my own path, a chilling realization crept in. Darkness would always be there, watching, waiting for the moment I let my guard down. Darkness would always be there, watching, waiting for the moment I let my guard down. I stumbled back through the trees, breathing heavily, each rustle of leaves sounding menacing, as if the forest itself held its breath in anticipation. The deeper I walked, the more unsettling the atmosphere became. The shadows seemed to linger, reluctant to retreat completely, skimming over the ground like snakes, every so often darting into my peripheral vision. The moon cast eerie patterns on the ground, and as I moved further away from the well, something strange tugged at my mind. I could hear faint whispers, almost like a chant, echoing through the trees. It was a rhythmic lullaby, an unsettling melody that wrapped around my thoughts, drowning out my rational fear. Against my better judgment, I followed the sound, compelled by an unknown force, drawn deeper into the woods. The trees closed in tighter, trunks twisting, branches reaching out like skeletal hands grasping at the air. I could feel cold air brushing against my skin, prickling my senses, and an uncomfortable shiver slithered down my back. The chant grew louder, pulsing with an unnatural energy, urging me forward. Each step felt like walking into a trap, yet my feet seemed to have a will of their own, pulling me toward the source of the sound. As I rounded a bend, I stumbled into an unsettling clearing, illuminated by a sickly greenish glow that seemed to seep from the very ground. It was a spiral of withered plants and twisted roots, coiled around each other in stark contrast to the life I remembered. At the center stood a stone altar, old and worn, covered in dark stains that looked like dried blood. My stomach churned at the sight, but something deeper called to me, a desire for discovery mingled with dread. The whispers intensified, wrapping around my consciousness like a heavy fog. I approached the altar with trepidation, each step echoing like a thunderclap in the silence. The moment I reached the center, the ground erupted with shadowy tendrils reaching up, trying to entangle my feet. I fought against it, shaking off the constricting grasp. "Join us," the voices beckoned, now clearer, filled with urgency. "Help us complete the offering." My heart raced, drawing back instinctively as images flashed in my mind. I saw them, the lost souls I had liberated from the well, hovering at the edge of the dark mass, their faces frozen in anguish. They were not free. They were bound, desperate to escape, but unable to break the curse that tied them to the altar. "No!" I cried, caught between wanting to run and the responsibility weighing on my heart. I felt their pain, their despair, and yet the shadows swirled closer, their forms shifting into horrors that made my skin crawl. Beady eyes emerged within the dark, watching me with a predatory hunger, mouths stretching into grins that promised suffering. In a burst of instinct, I dropped to my knees before the altar. "What do you need? What can I do to help you?" The words spilled out before I could stop myself, a mix of fear and determination igniting in my chest. The shadows lurched closer, eager to wrap around me, but I held fast, determined to free those tormented souls tied to this place. The shadows became still, hesitating, their whispering subsiding to a low, eerie hum. "A sacrifice," they intoned, voices intertwining, wrapping around my mind like vines. "A release from the shackles of darkness. Give us a piece of yourself." My breath caught in my throat. The thought of a sacrifice, part of me, for their freedom. The weight of that choice pressed down like a rock. Before I could fully process what this meant, I felt the pull of the shadows begin to slacken, a momentary flicker of hope igniting within me. If I could set them free, perhaps I could find a way to rid myself of this darkness once and for all. I searched deep within, grasping for something I could offer, something that wouldn't consume me entirely. Closing my eyes, I concentrated on the warmth of memories, the laughter of friends, the safety of home, the love I carried for those I had lost. My heart pounded, tied to these thoughts, and I willed that essence into a glowing light. Suddenly, I felt a sharp pain in my chest, as if the shadows sensed my intent. They advanced, twisting, trying to steal my light before it could take form. I gritted my teeth against the overwhelming urge to flee and focused, pouring everything I had into that ethereal glow. "Take this!" I shouted, forcing the light toward the altar, my heart racing. The shadows recoiled, but quickly began to absorb the warmth, writhing like serpents intoxicated by the offering. The moment the light touched the stone, a terrifying roar erupted from the woods. The trees shuddered, branches cracking under the weight of dark energy, swirling violently around me. Shadows lashed out, clamoring for the light, but I pushed harder, pouring my soul into the offering. "Free them!" I screamed, determination fueling my cries. "You must let them go!" I felt my energy drain, each pulse of warmth snuffed out like a dying star, but I pressed on, ignoring the darkness that began to seep into my bones. The altar erupted with a brilliant flash, illuminating the clearing in blinding light. Visions of the lost souls danced before me, their faces appearing within the glow, merging with my essence, drawing upon my offering like a lifeline. They cried out, voices harmonizing in a brilliant chorus, resonating with hope and agony. I could see them reaching for freedom, their chains melting away in the blaze. As the shadows writhed in panic, the air thick with rage and despair, I felt something give way within me. A deep bond formed, a connection between my spirit and theirs. They were anchoring me, pulling on the light I offered, pulling against the grip of the darkness that sought to consume us all. With a final surge, the shadows unleashed an agonizing wail, a sound of pure rage that reverberated through the woods. The energy burst forth, consuming everything in a brilliant white explosion. I stumbled backward, blinded, as the screams intensified, swirling around me, mixing with the light until it ignited the very air around us. Then, just as abruptly as it began, the sound stilled, and I found myself gasping on the forest floor, the intense luminescence fading into soft warmth. The world around me shifted, deconstructing the barriers that had held the darkness captive for so long. As my vision cleared, I glanced toward the altar, now glowing softly, bloodstains fading into the earth. The spirits of those lost souls floated nearby, no longer tormented but radiant and free. "Thank you," one of them whispered, a gentle voice that wrapped around my heart, soothing the pain of what I had just given. Their ethereal forms shimmered, iridescent, as they began to drift upward, a constellation of light against the dark sky. But even as their joy enveloped me, I could still feel the cold tendrils circling at the edges of the clearing. The shadows lingered, barely suppressed, and I realized with aching dread that the darkness was not gone for good. I had merely weakened it, drawn its hold from this place, but its essence remained a constant threat, lurking just outside the glow of the light. Every nerve in my body signaled danger. I felt their eyes on me, the shadows still hungry for my spirit, and somewhere within the trees, I caught a flicker of movement. The air chilled as the realization set in. There was something else, something that had been waiting quietly amidst the chaos. Where the souls had been, I now saw a darker form gathering, manifesting from the remnants of the shadows. It coiled like smoke, rising above the ground, distilling into something terrifying. I felt the creep of ice down my spine as I stood to face it, the weight of my sacrifice hanging heavy in the air. "I will not succumb," I declared, heart pounding as the shape solidified into a twisted figure, eyes glowing with a malevolent hunger. It towered over me, a grotesque amalgamation of despair and rage. "You think you can escape?" It growled, voice dripping with disdain. "I will claim what belongs to me." "What belongs to you?" I shouted, my voice trembling but determined. "You have nothing. I freed them. The moment the words left my mouth, its laughter erupted, filling the clearing with an echo so sinister it made my heart race. "Do you truly believe you can steal from the dark?" It hissed, shadows creeping closer, tightening their grip. I braced myself against the inevitable pull, knowing I had awakened a force more powerful than I could have anticipated. This creature was not simply an embodiment of the shadows, but a guardian of their suffering. The ground trembled beneath my feet, and I instinctively took a step back, prepared to run. But I knew I couldn't turn away, not now. I had fought too hard and lost too much to allow fear to dictate my actions. This was a battle, and I needed to stand my ground, no matter the cost. With trembling hands, I gripped the tiny bell that still radiated with the remnants of warmth from the spirits released. "You may have power here," I breathed, lifting it high, "but I am the light that will fight back." With a fierce ring, the bell sliced through the air, echoing defiantly. The shadows screamed, recoiling from the sound, but the dark figure only roared louder, enraged by my defiance. "Foolish mortal," it spat, and I could feel the ground beneath me shift, the very earth rising to fulfill its command. But I would not back down. I rang the bell again, pouring every drop of courage into the sound. It rang out like a clarion call, illuminating the clearing with a pearly light that pushed back against the looming darkness. The shadows struggled against it, shrieking with rage, their swirling forms starting to unravel. "You are weak," the figure howled, but I could see it falter. "Join us, surrender. You cannot survive alone." "No!" I shouted, feeling the light within me ignite once more, fueled by the journeys of those I had fought to free. "I am not alone." With renewed strength, I pushed the power of the light against it, feeling the connection to the souls drift away from me and into the clearing. They surged forth, merging with the light, and together we formed a barrier between me and the darkness, illuminating everything around us. For a moment, I felt almighty, filled with the energy of those freed from their chains. The dark figure hissed and writhed, a slithering mass of fury, clawing at the edges of the light that surrounded me. But our unity was too strong, and with one last resonating chime of the bell, the protective barrier expanded like a wave, crashing into the shadowy form. The air crackled with electricity, and as the light hit the entity, it shrieked in agony. The shadows peeled away from it, shaking loose like fallen leaves caught in a storm. Light erupted from the ground, bright enough to blind the trees, and as the darkness fractured, a haunting scream echoed through the forest, dissolving into a chilling silence. But even in victory, I felt the ground tremble beneath me, a reminder that this battle was part of a much larger war. Shadows still gathered, undeterred, waiting patiently in the recesses, a promise of future chaos and fear. "Go!" Their voices echoed in my mind, the lost souls urging me. "You are free, but we remain bound." I turned, facing the emptiness of the woods, feeling a tug at my heart. "I will come back for you," I called, feeling my pulse racing, the ache of their sorrow mingling with my own. "I promise." The shadows clouded the edges of my vision, but I didn't hesitate, turning to run through the shrinking light toward the path that would lead me back to the world beyond. As I dashed through the thicket, the trees wove tighter, and shadows swirled just beyond my reach. But even as the journey pushed me forward, I couldn't shake the feeling that this was not the end. The stories of the lost souls, their fate now tied with mine, would echo within my mind long after I escaped these woods. The deeper I ventured, the more unsettled the woods became, as if the darkness were regrouping, gathering strength, plotting for my return. Every echo of my footsteps sent chills racing down my spine, a reminder that no matter how far I ran, the shadows were lurking, waiting for their moment, watching me step into the light. And deep down, I knew the dark could not be so easily vanquished. I had only begun to scratch the surface of what this place held, and the battle in the clearing would haunt me long after it faded into memory. With each passing moment, I felt the weight of what I'd done resting heavily on my shoulders, the sense that my connections with the lost souls bound me to this dark fate. What did it mean for me in the long run? Would I truly be able to set them free? The thought echoed like a haunting melody in my head as I pushed deeper into the trees. The shadows behind me writhed and twisted, their prickling presence igniting a primal fear that sent adrenaline coursing through my veins. The further I went, the more the trees bent inward, their gnarled branches clawing at the sky. The air was thick, charged with an electric tension that seemed to anticipate my every step. A chilling breeze whispered through the leaves, carrying faint, disembodied voices that seemed to call my name. "I'm here," I muttered, unsure if I spoke to the spirits or the shadows. The underbrush crackled underfoot, each sound amplified in the oppressive silence that followed. I felt eyes on me, watching from the darkness, waiting for the moment I would falter. A sudden rustling broke the stillness, sending my heart racing. I glanced over my shoulder, but the shadows held their secrets close. "I won't let you take me," I told the looming darkness, my voice shaky. The fear was visceral, squeezing my throat as deep instinct told me that something was wrong. I pressed forward, hope battling against dread. Then it came a flash of movement to my right. I turned just in time to catch a glimpse of something darting behind a tree, a shape so dark it seemed to absorb all the surrounding light. The glimpse was gone in an instant, but my pulse hammered in response. "Is someone there?" I called out, receiving only the echo of my own voice in answer. I resumed my hurried pace, the hairs on the back of my neck standing on end. The whispers grew louder again, melding into frantic laughter that echoed through the trees. I could feel the shadows edging closer, their presence thickening as the air began to grow cold. The whispers formed words, taunting me, sidling up to my fears. "You are not alone in your journey." Swallowing hard, I pushed on. The path grew narrow, winding deeper into the forest. Unease threatened to overwhelm me, as if the darkness was coming alive, eager to pull me back. Each step felt like a descent into a deeper nightmare. I dared not look back again. My instinct screamed that the shadows were trailing close behind. The rhythmic crunching of leaves underfoot morphed into a muted thud, almost like a heartbeat. I could feel it in the ground, aligning with my own rapid pulse. The atmosphere was heavy with anticipation, a prelude to something sinister lurking in the distance. Suddenly, the trees parted to reveal a clearing bathed in a ghostly fog. At the center, a dilapidated cabin loomed, its windows dark and lifeless. The sight sent a chill creeping down my spine. This place felt wrong, poisoned by the weight of lost time. Should I go in? I hesitated, the shadows leering from the edges of the clearing, urging me forward. But I could not turn back. Not now. I steeled myself and approached the cabin. The door hung ajar, creaking softly in the wind, inviting yet foreboding. A shiver ran through me as I crossed the threshold, the air inside heavy with an unsettling stillness. My footfalls echoed eerily in the confined space, amplifying the suffocating sense of dread that settled over me. Inside, the room lay in shambles. Dust wafted through the air like the whispers of the lost. Cobwebs draped from the ceiling, curling around chairs that had long since rotted away. As I stepped further in, I spotted something glinting on the floor, a small, tarnished key. I picked it up, but a chill raced down my spine. With the sensation of being drawn inexorably deeper into a trap, I glanced at a door at the back of the cabin, wooden, bound with rusty iron. What does this lock lead to? I murmured to myself, turning the key over in my palm, the cool metal sending a tremor of unease through me. The shadows flitted near the walls, as though drawn toward the key. It felt like a heartbeat pulsing against my skin as I approached the door. I inserted the key, and with a deep breath I turned it. The lock clicked loudly, and the door creaked open, revealing a set of winding stairs spiraling downward into darkness. I peered into the abyss below, swallowing hard. Something sickly sweet wafted up from the depths, a smell unbearable and grotesque, making my stomach churn. I hesitated, my heart pounding as the whispers crescendoed into a cacophony, urging me to descend. Go down, join us, they chanted, entwining themselves around my thoughts like threads of silk. But there was no other choice. The darkness was relentless, clawing at my heels. I could feel it pressing in, eager to consume me, feeding off my fear. Gritting my teeth, I slowly made my way down the steps, each creak of the wood echoing in the cramped space. The world above faded into nothingness, and the air thickened with decay. As my feet landed on the cold stone floor below, I flicked on my flashlight. The beam cut through the murk, illuminating walls lined with aged stone. I gasped, taken aback by the scene unfolding before me. Chains hung from the walls, rusted remnants of the past, and in the corner lay an ancient altar, smeared with dark stains that twisted my stomach. Shadows danced grotesquely around the room, drawn to the light but repelled by it, an agonizing tug-of-war that made me dizzy. Do you see what you have awakened? A voice rasped from the darkness. I froze, scrambling for the light, but my flashlight flickered and died, plunging me into a deeper gloom. Panic surged through me. You cannot escape, the voice continued, chillingly calm. This is where all journeys end. I fumbled in the dark, searching for a way back, heart hammering in my chest as the darkness closed in around me, thickening like a fog. The sound of chains clinking sent a jolt of raw fear coursing through me, accompanied by unsettling whispers growing louder, thrumming against the back of my mind. Then I felt it, a hand, cold as death, grip my shoulder from behind. I spun around, and in the dim light, I could make out a figure, a pale, wraith-like silhouette whose eyes glowed with an otherworldly light. You should not have come here, it whispered, its voice like brittle leaves rustling in the wind. I stumbled back as the cold seeped through my clothing, dragging me closer to the altar. The shadows swirled, contrasting with the ethereal glow of the figure, casting horrific illusions that leapt at me from all sides. The walls began to close in, pushing me toward the altar's grotesque offering. No, I need to get out, I shouted, my voice trembling as terror washed over me. I lunged back up the stairs, desperate to escape, but the darkness slithered up behind me, pulling at my limbs with icy tendrils that dragged me down. Every ounce of energy poured into my legs as I forced myself to run. I could hear the whispers pleading, taunting, mocking with every step. You belong to us now. Stay with us. As I reached the door, the shadows clawed at my feet, and the wraith's chilling laugh echoed through the chamber. Summoning every last bit of defiance within me, I swung the door wide, and the sudden burst of light from the outside world pierced through the darkness like a beacon. I tumbled out, gasping for air, falling onto the forest floor. The cool night air was a sharp contrast to the suffocating grip of the shadows. I rolled over, expecting to see the darkness retreating, but there stood the wraith, its hollow gaze fixed on me, the light of the moon illuminating its ghastly features. Consider this a warning, it rasped, each word slicing through the silence around us. You will not escape your fate. I felt a chill grip my heart as I scrambled to my feet, racing deeper into the woods. The laughter followed me, ringing in my ears, the sound bittersweet and haunting. I couldn't shake the feeling that I had only managed to postpone the inevitable. As I dashed through the trees, their branches clawed at me like skeletal hands, and the shadows surged forth, following closely. My pulse quickened with each racing beat, the fear clawing at the back of my mind. What if I couldn't find a way to truly escape this darkness? A sudden flicker of movement caught my eye. Something darted between the trunks, more substantial this time, too close for comfort. My heart raced as I pushed harder, desperate to distance myself from the creature stalking me in the night. But the woods were merciless, the branches closing in around me as if trying to trap me. Just when I thought I could break free, I stumbled into another clearing, colder and darker than the last. At its center lay a gaping pit, a swirling vortex of shadows that glimmered like the night sky but whispered promises of torment. I approached it, compelled and terrified, feeling the cold energy pulling at me. Dread washed over me like a wave as I realized I was trapped between the pit and the encroaching shadows. There was no path left. A nightmare enveloped me. "Join us! Join us!" the voices wailed, rising from the pit, swirling around my heart like a cyclone of despair. I could feel the darkness pressing down, the weight of its multitude threatening to crush me. Gathering every ounce of strength, I screamed, "Leave me alone!" The shout echoed, swallowed by the mist, bold yet fragile in the face of the encroaching chaos. It was then that I made a decision. I wouldn't go quietly into that darkness. The corner of my eye caught sight of something, glimmering in the fog. A silver thread of light pulsed at the edge of my vision. "What is that?" I thought, drawn toward it desperately. The glow shimmered, illuminating the darkness just enough to show me there was still hope, that not all was lost. I lunged toward the light, feeling the shadows try to pull me back, but the thread seemed to respond to my desperation. I grasped it tightly, and warmth surged through me, pushing back against the cold hands of despair. "Let me go!" I roared, the words ripping from my throat as I pulled myself through the vortex. The darkness shrieked in fury, but I wouldn't relent. With every ounce of will, I began to weave the light tighter around me, drawing strength from it like a lifeline, a beacon of defiance igniting within my chest. As I fought against the darkness, the shadows writhed and twisted, losing their grip as I surged forward. "Not today!" I shouted, the light expanding outward, consuming the space around me, drowning the shrieks of the hopeless whispers. Just as I thought I would break through, an icy hand clamped down on my ankle, yanking me back. Panic flooded my heart, the realization crashing over me like a tidal wave. "You will never escape," the voice screeched, a terrifying amalgamation of all the souls that had been lost to this place. I felt my body pulled toward the pit, the shadows dragging me closer to their grasp. But in that moment of despair, I caught a glimpse of something behind the swirling darkness. The faces of the souls I had freed, their serene expressions urging me to fight. Roaring with newfound determination, I summoned everything within me. "You cannot have me," I bellowed. I focused all my energy into the thread of light, feeling its warmth surge through me. As I pulled harder, I felt the shadows recoiling, their shrieks of anger mixing with confusion. They thrashed, swirling around me like angry bees, but the light began to push them back, wrapping around their forms like a protective cocoon. "No!" the wraith-like figure screamed from the pit. I could feel the fear in its voice as the last remnants of that darkness began to dissolve. I erupted with energy, breaking through the layers of shadows, propelling myself up toward the shimmering light calling me from above. With a final wrenching pull, I broke free from the grip of darkness. The night sky enveloped me as I burst into the clearing, gasping for breath. The cold air hit me like a wave, grounding me. Yet the shadows persisted at the edges, hissing and thrashing in frustration. In that moment, I understood I had merely shifted the balance, but the war was far from over. I glanced back at the pit, the darkness swirling ominously, knowing that this wouldn't be the last time I would confront the fears that lurked within the shadows. But as the first light of dawn began to break over the horizon, I felt hope flicker inside my heart. I may not have defeated the darkness altogether, but I had taken a step toward freedom. Freedom for myself and those lost souls that would always be tethered to me. This was not an ending. It was merely another beginning in a twisted tale that tied us all together. With that realization, I turned away from the dark, ready to face whatever lay ahead. The forest felt changed, as if breathing with newfound energy. The gentle morning light dripped through the leaves, contrasting sharply with the malevolence I had felt moments before. But behind that brightness lingered a chilling reminder of the shadows that still remained, plotting in the dark corners of my mind. Just as I took my first step away from the clearing, a whisper snaked through the air, chilling my bones. "You cannot escape us," it hissed, a sinister echo resonating from every direction. I froze, my heart racing as panic flooded my senses. The shadows, once retreating to the pit, surged forward as if they had waited for this very moment. Their forms twisted and elongated, merging into a dark mass that seemed to pulse with an unholy rhythm, like the heartbeat of a monstrous creature. Defying my instinct to run, I stood still, desperately searching for the source of the voice. "Show yourself," I shouted, my voice cracking as the shadows writhed in eerie anticipation around me. "I am not afraid of you." But inside, a tremor of fear echoed louder than my bravado. The very air grew heavy, thickening with an oppressive tension that almost made it hard to breathe. Then, a figure began to coalesce from the writhing darkness, taking shape out of the void. Its eyes glowed, twin orbs of malevolent light glaring at me with a hunger that made my skin crawl. It stepped forward, its form shifting and elongating, as if made from shadows and fear itself. "Fear has a taste," it said, its voice a blend of many whispers, layered like the sound of leaves rustling underfoot. "And you brought us a feast." That twisted declaration sent ice through my veins. I turned to run, but found my feet on show, red to the ground, caught in an invisible web spun by sheer terror. The shadows encircled me, slithering closer until their icy tendrils brushed against my skin, sending shivers through my body. I felt visions clawing at the edges of my mind, scenes filled with lost souls, twisted and writhing, begging for mercy. "You are now part of our domain," the figure declared, stepping even closer, the light from its eyes piercing through me like daggers. I could see it more clearly now, a ghastly visage, a face warped by sorrow and rage, with a gaping mouth that stretched beyond human limits. You could feel every ounce of darkness wrapped up in its presence, a palpable despair that threatened to swallow me whole. As I grappled with the flood of dread, I remembered the silver thread of light from the pit, the warmth that had surged through me. Desperation clawed at my chest, urging me to fight back against this encroaching nightmare. "You don't control me," I shouted, forcing the words past a trembling throat. "I won't become one of you." With an effort, I closed my eyes and focused on the light I had felt, the warmth of hope. I grasped tightly to that memory, willing it to flow back into me. My heart raced with the potential, the possibilities of strength that live within each fight against darkness. If I could find that spark, perhaps I could drive the shadows back again. Suddenly, the darkness flinched, recoiling slightly at my defiance. The air, heavy with gloom, shifted as a flicker of light ignited in my mind. I opened my eyes, seeing the figure pause, confusion flickering in its beady glare. Perhaps I was beginning to break through. "Leave me," I demanded, channeling all my energy into my voice. "I am stronger than you think." The shadows began to swirl, momentarily tangled as if caught in a storm. I took a step forward, emboldened by the spark growing inside me. The ground beneath began to tremble, the ancient roots of the forest breaking free from their sleep, eager to join my fight against the darkness. But the figure laughed, a high-pitched sound that pierced through the dimness like broken glass. "You think your courage can save you?" It mocked, its words simmering with disdain. "You will always belong to the dark." Driven by sheer will, I pressed forward despite the weight of their laughter echoing in the air around me. I raised my hands, feeling warmth rush into my palms, gathering strength from deep within. A silver light erupted from my fingertips, spinning like a whirlwind that pushed back against the tendrils of creeping shadow. The darkness screamed in frustration, a cacophony of voices merging into one, clawing at the light as it spread, refusing to be snuffed out. "This is our world," the figure howled, its form grappling toward the light. "You do not belong here. I choose where I belong," I shouted back, channeling all my fear and sorrow into that powerful rebuke. The more I pushed, the more the shadows twisted and contorted, their bodies vibrating with a sense of impending doom as they fought against my determination. They had underestimated me, and I was done being the prey. With all my strength, I thrust my arms forward. The light erupted, filling the clearing, a brilliant flash that blinded even the darkest corners of the forest. The shadows hissed, retreating from the radiant glow, their twisted forms shrinking as the warmth spread. I felt the weight of despair lifting. The whispers faded, replaced by a chorus of silent screams as they were forced to relinquish their hold. But just as victory seemed within reach, I noticed the figure surge in power, its malevolence compounding in fury and fear. "You cannot escape," it screeched, a noise that reverberated through the air like thunder. As the light surged stronger, it coiled around me, wrapping tight, dragging me back into the dark. The ground shook beneath my feet, and the very fabric of reality felt like it was tearing apart. "No!" I screamed, panic washing over me as the shadows lunged forward, their tendrils coiling around me like snakes. I could feel the cold despair tightening around my soul, the insistent pull of darkness gorging on fear. In that instant, I understood I was standing at the precipice of something much larger than a mere battle between light and shadow. I was at the center of an ongoing war, a cosmic struggle between hope and despair that transcended time and space. And in that realization, I experienced a surge of courage like never before. I could either succumb to the engulfing blackness, or I could ignite the fire that still burned within me. Gritting my teeth, I raised my voice, channeling every ounce of fortitude into my scream. "I am not afraid. I will find my way back to the light." With that declaration, the silver light intensified, shooting forth in blinding waves, piercing through the shadows. A radiant force erupted, splintering the darkness, the chains of despair shattering like glass. I felt the liberating rush of warmth sweep through me, a resurgence of hope flooding my veins. The wraith recoiled, its form glitching into shadows, no longer that absolute terror, but a reflection of its own fear. "You will pay for this," it screeched, the threat laced with desperation. I felt the last vestiges of its power wane, as the shadows hissed and wrangled against the brilliance of the light. But before I could take another step, I stumbled backward, losing my footing as the ground cracked beneath me. I realized too late that the pit behind me had begun to widen, the depths yawning like a black maw. Desperation coursed through me as I watched the light begin to flicker, the shadows reaching for me like skeletal hands emerging from the abyss. In a moment of sheer instinct, I lunged forward, gripping a nearby tree trunk for balance, pulling myself back from the brink. Sweat dripped down my face as I fought against the sudden surge of dread. Looking back toward the churning pit, a wild thought crossed my mind. Could this be a chance to end it? Maybe I can draw the darkness back to the pit, I thought, crisis sharpening my instincts. Maybe I can use my strength against it. With trembling resolve, I focused on the darkness swirling around me, tugging at my consciousness. "You feed on fear, don't you?" I yelled, my voice cutting through the turmoil. "Then let's see if you can consume my courage instead." As I began to channel my energy into the shadows, I felt the light swell within me. To my surprise, the darkness hesitated, recoiling from my defiance. It was an odd moment of clarity, as if our conflict had metamorphosed into a dance, a twisted ballet of courage against despair. With a flick of my wrist, I released the wave of shimmering power that surged from my core. It twisted and turned, swathing the shadows in radiant energy, wrapping them in a cocoon of light. They screeched, pulling back, but I pressed on, feeding the flames of hope burning inside me. "Into the pit you go," I commanded, thrusting my hands forward, channeling all that radiant energy into the swirling darkness at my feet. I focused on the spawn of shadows, weaving them back toward the gaping maw, feeling the pull of their anguish and the weight of their despair. The colors of light and dark bent and twisted, merging into a cyclone of chaos and clarity. The air thickened, and I could feel the struggle within me. Each moment was a balance of strength and fear, a tightrope walk across a sea of shadows. "You will not win this time," I screamed, determined to take control of this battle. Just as the shadows began to unravel, pulling together and reshaw, pinging into that ghastly figure, a deafening roar erupted from the pit. The air crackled with energy, and the shadows shrieked, an unsettling chorus of anguish. "You are a fool to challenge us," it howled, its features distorted by rage. But I would not falter. I could see the silver light starting to break against the darkness, each wave forcing the shadows further back. My heart pounded, and with a final surge of will, I powered my energy deep into the pit. The darkness twisted violently as it was pulled back, a cosmic struggle raging as shadows vanished into the yawning chasm. But even as I felt the shadows weaken, I knew they would not give up easily. Their presence still throbbed in the air, a flickering pulse that echoed through the forest. "This is not the end," the figure hissed one last time, an echo that morphed with the far-off whispers of the woods. "You may have won this battle, but the war has only just begun." With that, the last remnants of darkness vanished, swept back into the pit, leaving behind a stillness that wrapped around me like a shroud. I collapsed against a tree, gasping for breath. The weight of what just transpired pressed heavily upon me. But even in the calm, uncertainty slithered through my veins. There was no denying it. I could still feel the pull of the darkness, the taint of shadows lurking just beyond the edge of my mind. What if this wasn't over? What if my struggle birthed something horrible? My fingers trembled as I gripped the bark, the weight of fear coiling within my heart. I had faced the dark and won. But what if that victory only awakened something deeper? Nevertheless, I stood, feeling the first rays of dawn warm my skin. There was light in the world again, but I understood now that light and dark danced together, intertwined. The forest around me was alive with promise and treachery, filled with secrets waiting to be unearthed. My resolve hardened. There were still souls to save, battles to be fought, and fears to confront. I couldn't hide from the darkness, nor could I let it claim me. The fight awaited, lingering in the uncluttered paths of the woods, where shadows slumbered and light held its breath. I took a deep breath and faced the sunrise, steeling myself for whatever lay ahead. The forest may be filled with nightmares, but I wouldn't back down. I would confront the darkness again, fortified by the light and the knowledge that I was never truly alone in this fight. With a newfound purpose, I stepped forward into the uncertain day, ready to unravel the mysteries of the forest and face the horrors that still lurked in the shadows. As I pushed forward, a shiver ran down my spine, a haunting sense of foreboding wrapping around me like a cloak soaked in ice. The forest, bathed in the early morning's golden light, felt alive. Each rustling leaf and distant cawing of a crow resonated within me, amplifying the unease. I could sense the forest's hidden eyes watching, waiting for the next move. Shadows danced at the periphery of my vision, flickering and retreating only to flutter back. Were they remnants of the darkness I had fought, or something even more sinister? My heart thudded heavily against my ribs as I stepped deeper into the woods. The path beneath my feet was no longer familiar. Twisted roots and gnarled branches seemed to reach for me, yearning to ensnare me once more. Each creak of the branches overhead echoed like the mocking laughter of lost souls. I ventured further, each step accompanied by the eerie silence that hung thick in the air, choking off my thoughts, trapping me in a web of dread. Then, out of the corner of my eye, something moved, the fleeting shape of a figure, cloaked in the very shadows I had fought to vanquish. My breath caught. I whipped around, expecting to confront the darkness, but it was gone. Panic surged within me, the sensation of being hunted gnawing at my mind. I was in their territory now, a hunter in a land of predators disguised as the hunted. The distant rustle of leaves morphed into whispers, voices barely audible, yet filled with agony and despair. They called out, beckoning me, weaving an intricate web of temptation. "Come join us," they murmured, a chilling symphony that echoed through the trees, lingering like the taste of ash in my mouth. I pressed on, instinct screaming at me to flee, to escape the sinister lure. Yet I felt an unshakable compulsion to draw closer. As the light began to fade, turning the trees into ominous silhouettes, I reached an ancient clearing shrouded in mist. A decrepit stone altar stood at its center, overgrown with vines and clinging moss. It pulsed with an unnatural energy, the air around it charged with palpable dread. Inscribed in the stone were symbols that twisted and writhed as if alive, telling tales of lost souls trapped within the void. I hesitated, a deep instinct urging me to turn back, to flee the scene that felt like a curse brought forth from the depths below. But curiosity overpowered caution. I stepped closer, drawn into its malevolent embrace. As I reached forward to touch the weathered stone, a cold wind cut through the clearing, swirling around me, pulling me into its depths. The whispers amplified, becoming frantic cries, echoing in my mind. "You're too late," they howled, their voices blending into a cacophony of anguish. "You cannot leave. This is your fate." In that moment, the ground trembled beneath my feet, and the shadows coalesced around the altar, forming shapes that twisted and howled in pain. I stumbled back, my heart racing wildly. The very air shimmered with dark energy, wrapping around me like fingers intent on holding me in place. I fought against the pull, but found myself rooted to the spot, unable to escape the despair that threatened to consume me. Then, with a resounding crash, the altar split open, revealing a black maw that yawned wider than any nightmare. A swirling vortex of darkness erupted, pulling at my very essence, beckoning me to join those who had been lost before me. My body shook as I felt the cold fingers of the void reach for me, each shadowy tendril freezing my resolve. I gasped, desperately struggling to pull away, to escape the pull of despair. "Fight it!" A voice rang clear above the chaos, breaking through the tumult. It was a voice I recognized, filled with warmth and courage. The faces of those I had saved flashed in my mind, their encouragement fueling my strength. With newfound determination, I summoned the light within me, feeling it rise like a flame against the encroaching night. With a wild scream, I channeled that inner spark, pushing back against the darkness. It ignited within me like a wildfire, illuminating the clearing in pure brilliance. The shadows recoiled, screeching as the light enveloped the altar, flooding the void with radiant energy. I felt the pull of despair weaken, losing its grip as I stood firm, resolute against the tide of fear. But as the light surged, the figure I had confronted earlier emerged from the darkness, its distorted features twisted in rage. "You think you can defy us? We are eternal," it shrieked, its voice a thunderous roar punctuated by guttural gasps. I could feel the forest trembling in response, the very essence of terror swirling around us. "Yes," I shouted back, my voice steady despite the chaos. "I will not be swallowed by your darkness. I am stronger than fear." The light intensified, bursting forth in a brilliant flash that pierced through the heart of the shadows. The figure let out a final, anguished cry, disintegrating into the swirling darkness, scattering into nothingness. As the void began to collapse in on itself, I took a step back, feeling the powerful remnants of the battle surge through the air. The energy shifted, twisting around me like a storm, until finally, the shadows evaporated into a soft mist, leaving behind an echo of silence that felt almost sacred in its aftermath. I stood alone, the clearing now illuminated by the soothing glow of dawn breaking through the trees, as the light swept away the remnants of fear that had once held me captive. But even as I reveled in the fleeting tranquility, a shadow of uncertainty lingered in the corners of my mind. I realized I had won a significant battle, but the war had not been fully fought. The darkness that had once threatened to consume me was still out there, lurking, hungry to reclaim its lost power. As I breathed in the cool morning air, I acknowledged that this was not simply an end. It was a new beginning. As I turned to leave the clearing, I swore to myself that I would always remain vigilant, that I would protect the light within me, and keep searching for those still trapped in the shadows. This fight would not be easy. Danger still lay ahead, shadows waiting to leap from darkness to light. But I was ready. The forest was alive, and I would navigate its twisted paths, forging my own way through the tales of terror and triumph that lingered in its depths. With every step, the weight of what I had faced faded, replaced by a renewed sense of purpose. No longer a victim, I emerged not only armed with light, but also a deeper understanding of the delicate balance between hope and despair. And as the morning sun rose, casting its warm glow through the trees, I made a silent vow to confront whatever darkness dared to cross my path once more.